I think the Eddie Malenko matches from ECW are great. I think they're kind of they're just one of those great pure wrestling pairings, like a Flair Steamboat or an Angle Benoit or a Benoit and Jericho or Jericho and Ray or Ray and Angle, or just one of those great pure wrestling type of pairings that you expect a great match out of them every single time. The first time I ever saw them work together was in WCW. I didn't see the ECW matches initially because I didn't have access to ECW back in '95 when they were having their series of matches. So I didn't see those until about I want to say early 2000s, so I was a little bit slow in the uptake on that one, but when I eventually did see him, it was very interesting to see, like, this part of Malenko and Guerrero's history that I'd never seen before, and the matches were great. Obviously, I'm not watching them with a fresh... I'm not watching them as they're happening in real time, so I'd already had the results spoiled for me, which kind of takes away from it a little bit, but at the same time, you just gotta appreciate just the pure... the pure action of the whole thing and just what they were able to do and the stuff that they did together. It was really ahead of its time. I'm trying to remember specific ones. What was the name of that show? The Hostile City Takeover show or whatever that was. The TV title match they had, that one was probably my favorite. That one was great. The one that ended in the time limit draw. And their 2 out of 3 falls match, which was the last match for both of them before they headed off to WCW. And that one, I would have preferred a finish in that one. It ended with a double pin, and that there's that part of me that wishes that the final match had a little bit more of a conclusive finish, but it also had a great atmosphere to it because the fans were chanting the entire time, "Please don't go, please don't go," and gave them a standing ovation when it was over and everything, and both Eddie and Malenko took the mic afterward, spoke from the heart, and said goodbye and everything. So that match had a great atmosphere to it in addition to being this pure wrestling classic. I also, to throw WCW into the mix, I really liked their match from Starrcade 97. In 1997, that was the year where both Eddie and Malenko were having great matches seemingly every week. Malenko could do no wrong in the ring, and Eddie had really come into his own as a character at that point, was a great heel, and he was having great matches all the time. He'd actually just had that great match with Ray at Halloween Havoc just a couple months beforehand. But those ECW matches they had have a place in history. They obviously inspired a lot of people, and they're great. They're just really, really great. I wouldn't say they're my favorite matches from ECW. I would still give that to Jerry Lynn and Rob Van Dam. I think those matches really captured the essence of what ECW was all about. But Eddie and Malenko, they're a close second. Their matches were outstanding. I really like Bob Dylan's music. It's very relaxing and great for, I actually use it a lot. I listen to his music a lot as I'm just sitting around my desk or on my computer just working on something or typing up a report or working on my videos and doing editing or whatever. Like if I'm doing something menial, like for some reason Bob Dylan is just perfect for that. It's just the perfect background noise. And I like his songs. My favorite song he did, it's either like a Rolling Stone or Hurricane. I think those are my 2 favorites, and they're just great. They're just really good. The man did good work. I've got quite a few from the Attitude Era that I really liked. Obviously, if I was going to include WrestleMania, like WrestleMania 14 would be near the top of the list, but that's not the question. So, best non-WrestleMania Attitude Era pay-per-views. Royal Rumble 2000 comes to mind, mainly for the Cactus Jack Triple H street fight, which is one of the best matches I've ever seen. That match is absolutely incredible. Fully Loaded 2000 comes to mind. That was the show with the triple main event, and you had Undertaker versus Kurt Angle, which was a solid match. You had Jericho versus Triple H in that amazing Last Man Standing match. I still say the best Last Man Standing match ever. That was great. And then you had Benoit versus Rock in the main event, which is one of the better, like, pure wrestling matches that Rock ever had. That was also a great match. So, really liked all of those. Another one I really liked, for pure booking, I thought Survivor Series 98 was incredible. The way they were able to execute The Rock's heel turn and the way they booked the whole tournament and everything was very, very good. And, there were no Match of the Year contenders or anything on the show except for maybe Rock and Mankind in the finals, if you want to argue that. And even that match, I don't think too many people would rank too highly. But from a booking standpoint, I thought the show was absolutely incredible, and I thought they did a really good job with it. Actually, 98 and 2000 were the 2 years where I thought they had some really good pay-per-views. SummerSlam 98 was a great one. That was one with the build-up to Austin Taker. The show felt like a WrestleMania, and giving it, setting the show in MSG gave it that great atmosphere as well. So that was a show that actually did feel like a WrestleMania, that particular SummerSlam. And it was great. And, in addition to the Austin Taker main event, you also had Triple H and Rock in the ladder match. You had Mick Foley getting, that huge sympathetic moment where the Outlaws beat him in a 2-on-1 match, and then Kane attacks him afterwards. I thought the booking on that was tremendous. You had D'Lo Brown and Val Venus having a really good match for the Euro title. And actually, to speak up more mid-card matches, Fully Loaded 2000, going back to that show, that was the show that had Rikishi and Val Venus in that, I thought, personally, great cage match for the IC title that nobody remembers. But that was the one where Rikishi dove off the cage. I thought that match was very good. And there was a lot of good things on a lot of those shows I really liked. I'm trying to think of some other ones. Royal Rumble 98 I really liked. Mainly, the casket match was very good. I thought the Rumble was very interesting with Austin basically taking on the world. You had Rock and Shamrock. You had Outlaws versus LOD. So, yeah, overall, I thought that one was a good one. You had a lot of great main events during the Austin McMahon run just because they just had great storylines going all throughout. That doesn't necessarily mean the full card was good. I'm trying to think. There's got to be one more I could throw up there. I'll say No Way Out 2001 was another very good one. That was the one with the Triple H and Austin 3 Stages of Hell. Literally the only good 3 Stages of Hell match that the WWE has ever done. You had Rock beating Angle for the title in the main event and a couple of other things. I think, memory serves me right, that was the show that had that 4-way for the Intercontinental title, which is just a really good athletic match. I'm trying to remember this off the top of my head. I believe it was Jericho, X-Pac, Justin Credible, and Eddie Guerrero. I want to say it was those 4, and I remember them having a really good 4-way on that show. But again, this is 14 years ago, so who knows? But if I had to pick a number 1, I would probably go with Royal Rumble 2000. But there were plenty of good options for non-WrestleMania pay-per-views from the Attitude Era that were really good. Again, there are a lot of options. There are a lot of animated films that I really, really like. Obviously, you got to start with Disney because Disney's kind of the brand poobah of animated films. I love The Lion King. That was the best one during their big Renaissance period. I love Beauty and the Beast. That one I didn't like as much when I was a kid. I love it now as an adult. I think that one has gotten so much better with age. I really like, my favorite one of the older ones was Sleeping Beauty, and I could go off on an entire rant about why I love that movie so much, but, I love the villain, I love the fairies as the heroes, I love the fact that there's a fucking dragon at the end, that, when you're 4 years old, the fucking dragon shows up, that's just outstanding, and, really like Sleeping Beauty. I like Robin Hood, that one is a bit of an underrated one. It has one of the best climaxes that Disney ever did. I love Fox and the Hound, and that's one of their more somber and subtle ones. But I really think Fox and the Hound is a lot deeper than people realize, and that's one that doesn't always get brought up a lot. But love Fox and the Hound. My number 1 favorite that Disney ever did was The Great Mouse Detective. And that comes from the fact that Sherlock Holmes is my favorite fictional character of all time. I love the books. I love most adaptations and incarnations of Sherlock Holmes, and to me, The Great Mouse Detective is like Disney's version of Sherlock Holmes, and I just love it. And how can you not love Vincent Price as the villain? I mean, him as Ratigan is just it's just beautiful. It's wonderful. And obviously, I put over Frozen really heavily. I know a lot of people are sick of it now because of the overhype and the big reaction to it, but I thought Frozen was very good. I also really like Princess and the Frog. I've defended that one. People say that film's racist, and I disagree. But really like that one. Mulan is another one that I think is underrated. I think that one's very good. Aladdin is another one. Disney does good work, for the most part. Not all of them are winners. I did see The Black Cauldron and Home on the Range. I did see those films. So not everything they do is gold, but they definitely have their keepers. If we're going to look at Pixar, I mean, they went on a streak there for a while where just everything they turned out was great. Obviously, the Toy Story trilogy is just classic. I love The Incredibles. I love Finding Nemo. And I thought, when Finding Nemo came out, I thought they'd never top it. I thought it was like, that's going to be their grand opus, their magnum opus. They'll never top it. And then, sure enough, they came out with WALL-E, which was fantastic. WALL-E might be my favorite Pixar character ever. I love him. Ratatouille is a big favorite of mine. That one might be my #1 favorite Pixar film. I just love the humor and the setup and the setting and the payoff at the end and everything. Ratatouille was one that really took me by surprise, and I really liked. Up is just heart-wrenching, and you wouldn't expect it to be, but that one is also very good. So Pixar, they've done really good work. Not lately, unfortunately. Since Toy Story 3, they've kind of been coasting, but hopefully they come back and put out another classic. Other animated films outside of Disney and Pixar, I mean, DreamWorks, the Shrek movies I really like. I actually really like the Madagascar films, and I didn't think I would. I saw those, I'm like, they're kind of funny. I mean, they kind of got this, like, zany insanity to them that I really liked. The Kung Fu Panda movies are way better than you would ever expect them to be. I saw the first one expecting to hate it, and I was blown away by how good it was. That was one that, you want to learn don't judge a book by its cover, motherfucker. Kung Fu Panda, that one's a keeper. Again, going outside of Disney, obviously growing up as a kid, Transformers the movie had a huge impact on me. It was the first movie that made me cry. When Optimus Prime died in that film, it just devastated me. But because of that, it sort of resonated with me, and it stays with me. And I think the movie holds up really well. I mean, it's a very ballsy animated film. And to me, that film changed Transformers forever, because that was the film that kind of instilled that, okay, this isn't just a superhero Saturday morning TV show. This is a war between warring factions, and people die, and the soldiers in these armies die, and that was something that was never brought up in the cartoon show prior to the movie, and I think the movie kind of instilled that and changed it. And I think ever since that movie came out, like, the comics have reflected that, the TV shows that followed have reflected that. Even the Michael Bay movies, as stupid as they are, reflect that aspect to the Transformers, that this is a war. It's not... it's not Saturday morning, sugar-coated goody-goody goodness. It's a war where people fucking die. And that I think it really started with that movie. Another one, I love the original Hobbit, the animated Rankin Bass Hobbit film. And I know a lot of Tolkien purists don't like it. Personally, I think it does an amazing job of capturing the best elements of the book and presenting it in its own unique way. It's a little rushed. I mean, it's barely over 70 minutes long, and a lot quicker than the Jackson version, which takes up, I think 8.5 hours or something, which, come on, Peter, God damn it. Just God damn it, Peter. Lord of the Rings deserve to be that long, and longer. But not The Hobbit, no. But that original animated Hobbit, I think, is really good. It has its own unique visual style. No other animated film quite looks like it, except for Rankin Bass's version of Return of the King, which is nowhere near as good. So I'd recommend just skipping that. But And although I will say both Rankin Bass animated Tolkien films are way better than the Ralph Bakshi Lord of the Rings film, which is animated. That film is terrible. It's atrocious, but the Rankin Bass Hobbit film I really like. And actually, when I read the book, when I read The Hobbit, those are the voices I hear. I felt like they really captured those situations and those characters. And I remember that was the movie that made me fall in love with Gollum as a character. I just entranced by him. The Riddles of the Dark sequence in that film is just so amazing. Obviously, Andy Serkis would come along and just completely own that role and make it his own. But my first exposure to Gollum was that animated Hobbit film, and he kind of creeped me out, and he was really weird and really odd. But it was the best scene in the movie, and I really liked him as a character. So, yeah, I love that animated Hobbit film. Don Bluth's early work, basically everything he did up to All Dogs Go to Heaven is pretty much a masterpiece. All Dogs Go to Heaven is like the weakest one in his early works. And if that's your weakest film early on, then you knew you did good work. Then he started doing shit like Rockadoodle and Pebble and the Penguin and that fucking Thumbelina and those fucking shit movies that were terrible. It was almost like he lost his goddamn mind. I don't know what happened, but I love Land Before Time. I already put over All Dogs Go to Heaven. He did the small one when he was with Disney, which is one of my favorite Christmas specials. It's not a movie, but I really like the small one. And his best work by far is The Secret of Nim. I think that is an outstanding animated film, and it's I was heartbroken when I heard it's going to get remade with CGI rats, and I just know it's going to be bouncy and cutesy and have pop culture references in it, and it's going to be horrible, but it's going to make a shitload of money, and it's going to get sequels because fuck you, that's why we're Hollywood and we want to destroy your childhood. But that original Secret of Nim is so good. It's so just dark and creepy, but so imaginative, and the main character is great. I love Mrs. Brisby. She's a great character to follow throughout the entire story, and I think it's an outstanding animated film. I think it's one of the best. So I'm trying to think of some other ones. The Iron Giant, I think, is outstanding. That's a great one that really flew under the radar when it first came out, but has really gotten a lot of love since then, and that one's outstanding. I love that one. I think Brad Bird directed that. He would go on to do The Incredibles and stuff like that. So, yeah, that one's great. Well, going back to Disney, another underrated one, Rescuers Down Under, which I think I'm one of 10 people that has seen that movie, but that one's underrated, but it's very good. Nightmare Before Christmas is a stop-motion animation masterpiece. That one's great. Trying to think of some other ones. I should note, I have not seen any Miyazaki films. I know the Miyazaki films get a lot of love and are critically praised and just adored all around the world. I've never seen any of them, so I can't really say anything good about them, unfortunately. One of these days I'm going to sit down and just marathon the fuck out of those Miyazaki films, because I hear they're really good. I've had people tell me that I would love Princess Mononoke. It's like, that's the one that you'll really, really like. It's like, okay, one of these days I'll get around to watching it. But obviously there are a lot of great animated films out there. I forgot another one, Fantasia. That one's one of Disney's best. Again, Disney, they do good work. Fantasia's amazing, and again, it's one of those ones that didn't really hit me as a kid, but as an adult, I really appreciate the way they integrated the music and were able to tell visual stories using nothing but music and animation. I love that whole concept. I think it's great. I have not seen Fantasia 2000, which I've heard is pretty good, not as good, but still pretty good. But in any case, I've rambled enough about cartoon movies. There are a lot that I really love, and oh my god, I forgot another one. Oh geez, they're all wrong to me. Batman Mask of the Phantasm is outstanding, is great, and I remember seeing it in theaters and loving it. And to be perfectly honest, except for The Dark Knight, I would say it's the best Batman movie I've ever seen in theaters, which isn't saying much. And actually, I remember seeing it in theaters, and I begged my dad to take me to go see it. I was like, I have to see this because I love the cartoon show and I love Batman. I have to see it. I did not see Batman Forever in theaters. I did not see Batman and Robin in theaters. I did not see Batman Returns in theaters. I was too young to see the first Burton one in theaters. But, you know, the first live-action Batman movie I saw in theaters was Batman Begins. But Batman Returns, Batman Forever, and Batman and Robin, I didn't feel compelled to go see. Batman Mask of the Phantasm, I had to see it, and it delivered, and I loved it, and it was great, and it still holds up. I think it's fantastic. So, okay, hopefully that's the last one. I love animated movies. There are a lot of great ones out there. I can't pick a #1 favorite, unfortunately, because there's so many great ones. But, yeah, animated films. There are a lot of great ones, and hopefully I gave you some good recommendations for some that you haven't seen before. So go out and find them. They're really good. It doesn't so much annoy me as much as it does make me laugh, because you will always have those fans that will defend the WWE no matter what they do. No matter what they do, you will always have those fans that defend the good old WWE on every decision they make, on everything that they do. It doesn't matter. And even if they do something incredibly stupid, it's like, look, let's see where it goes. And, hey, guys, you're being too negative. And all those other things. So, in order to defend the decision to push Roman Reigns, they pretty much have to go after Daniel Bryan, because there's nothing to defend in terms of Reigns. So it's like, all right, what positives do they point out in Roman Reigns? The same bullet point, you know, things that the WWE says. He has a look. He has the size that we're looking for, even though he's not that big. You know, he's a big, strong guy, and that's what Vince likes. They can't. All they can say is what he is. They can't really. There's nothing to defend, because he is what he is, and I've already started to, you know, I've already made the point that I think he's best served as a hot tag guy, and I think that's the extent of, maybe that's the extent of his ability. Jim Neidhart made a great career out of being a hot tag guy, and it worked great for him. But, you know, I don't see it in Reigns. I'm not seeing it, and, you know, most of the audience isn't seeing it. You can just see, like, the apathetic response that he gets on Raw every week is just kind of like, oh, okay, this is your main event, this is your Mania main eventer. But for those, like, WWE, you know, they're just so obsessed, and they just want to stay positive, and they will support them no matter what. In order to defend that Reigns decision, they almost have to go after Bryan, because there's nothing to say about Roman Reigns that's positive. There's nothing there, and that's kind of where they have to go. And I think it's funny, but that's like, to make our guy look good, we gotta tear down the other guy, and it's like, okay, sure. I mean, I don't like Daniel Bryan because I hate Roman Reigns or anything. You know, it's like I can sit here all day and list reasons why I like Daniel Bryan, and sit here and list reasons all day why I'm not a huge fan of Roman Reigns. It's just, it is what it is. But in any case, it is. I think it's kind of funny. I always get a chuckle out of it when I see that type of stuff. To be perfectly honest, it was kind of amazing. You wouldn't think it would be possible to turn something like Mighty Morphin Power Rangers into something that adult and that gritty and that just intense, but it was pretty awesome. And my initial response to it was, I don't know whether to stand up and cheer because of how amazing that was, or to roll into a ball and cry because my childhood just got destroyed. But in any case, like, if you haven't seen it, go check it out, because it's kind of amazing. But I was really impressed with it, and I thought it was very cool and really awesome. So yeah, go check it out. I think my pick would be Bret Hart versus the British Bulldog from SummerSlam 1992. And the reason I say that is because when that match happened, I had people tell me that, it was all right, look, pro wrestling is bullshit. Like, that first match was bullshit. The second match was bullshit. Not real at all. That match was real, though. I had so many people tell me that match was real. And going back and watching it, I think, number one, Bret Hart, his matches were typically more believable than most anyway. But also, I think the family drama that was involved with Diana having to watch both her brother and her husband wrestle each other, it didn't come across like a wrestling angle. It felt like they handled it in the way that would seem legitimate and seem real. And it felt like, you know, if pro wrestling were a shoot, it would... That's probably the closest to how I would envision it would actually look, would be that match. And I would just want people to watch it. It's like, all right, well, if you want to get into pro wrestling, this is the match that everybody thinks is real. So but what do you think? Check it out. And it is one of my favorite matches of all time. It has great action, great wrestling. The drama is interesting and engaging. It's in front of a huge crowd that's fully into it. And it even has botch spots in that match that actually improve the match, if that makes any sense at all. Like, even the botches are improving this match. So it's just one of those magical matches that I really like. So I would recommend checking that one out, just because the response to it back when I first saw it was so interesting. I would want to show it to people and say, well, what do you think? Tell me what you thought of it, and you know, go from there. And maybe that could get them into pro wrestling, so who knows. Well, I guess I already answered this with the answer to Dalyxman's question, but yeah, I was a Power Rangers fan back in the day. I mean, obviously, if you were a young kid in the early 90s, you kind of had to be. And for me personally, it had like everything I could ever want in a show. It had action, it had giant monsters, it had robots, it had aliens, it had kung fu fighting, you know, martial arts. I shouldn't be phrasing it like that, but it had all sorts of things. And of course, it also had that high school fantasy element to it that Saved by the Bell had, where it's like, hey kids, this is what high school is going to be like, and then you get to high school and it's nothing like that at all. But it had that kind of like idealistic vision of what high school was really like as well. So Power Rangers kind of had everything that young me would ever want in a TV show. And even though it was silly and ridiculous and didn't make any sense, to me it was kind of the Adam West Batman of the 90s. It was just really funny, and you can appreciate it on different levels. Watching it now, I kind of appreciate it for how cheesy and silly it is. And I'm like, yeah, this is entertaining. I think it's funny. The Green Ranger was my favorite, as I think he was just about everybody's favorite. And of course, his Zord was basically Mechagodzilla, so naturally, granted, it was Dragon Zord, but just loved him. And the flute, the dragon dagger he had was great. Yeah, I remember. I'm trying to think what else. I had a big thing when I was younger. I liked girls very early on, and I had a big thing for brunettes. Like, just something about brunettes, man, that just drove me nuts. Dark-haired women. I'm like Ron Swanson. I like dark-haired women and breakfast foods. And actually, it's funny. I actually just had pancakes for dinner, so... But yeah, I had this huge crush on the Pink Power Ranger. Among other, you know, her, Kelly Kapowski, Kirstie Alley had a big crush on, Jennifer Connelly, for the wrestling fans, Miss Elizabeth, obviously. Just something about dark-haired women, man, I don't know, and the Pink Power Ranger was one of them. Good old Amy Jo Johnson, she's just so nice, so nice. Also, I should note, I didn't watch Power Rangers for too long. I think I watched up until about the movie, and that was about the time I stopped. And I watched a couple of other things here and there after that. I did watch the Ninja Turtles crossover that they did when I think they were doing Power Rangers in Space at that point. And I did watch the Ninja Turtles crossover, and I sat there the whole time watching it and just thinking, man, if they had done this 4 or 5 years ago, this would have been amazing. But it wasn't good. I think I saw the Power Rangers in Space finale, which had all the villains from all the other shows come in and try to take over the universe, and they did their big grand finale there. I should also note, as far as villains go, Lord Zed was way better than Rita Repulsa. I thought Lord Zed was awesome, and there's that kind of like aspect to me. It's like, yeah, Lord Zed, he's the USA villain. He's because he was only in the US version, and I was like, yeah, he's our bad guy, and he's awesome. And Lord Zed, because normally whenever you change something about a kid's show, or any show, quite honestly, people don't like change. So there's always an adjustment period, or there's always like, okay, I don't feel comfortable with this. But when Lord Zed came in and replaced Rita, I was like, yep, I'm fully on board with this. This guy's awesome. Of course, eventually they got married, but whatever. That was a little weird, but but yeah, I accepted Lord Zed right away. It was kind of the anti-Serpentor, because G.I. Joe was actually the first time that a show jumped the shark for me, where I was like, no, I'm done. Serpentor replaced Cobra Commander. I'm done. And Serpentor was supposed to be this badass that was going to like lead Cobra against G.I. Joe, and he was going to be the competent leader, and really he was just a goofball. He was every bit as goofy as Cobra Commander, but with none of the heart and none of the... He wasn't intentionally funny, and that was why Serpentor didn't work. And, you know, you replaced Cobra Commander, and that just made me unhappy. And I was like, all right, G.I. Joe, I'm done with you. I'm done. Nope, done with the show. I can't watch it anymore. But Lord Zed came in. I was like, yeah, this guy's awesome. So that was kind of funny. But, yeah, Power Rangers. I have a lot of fond memories of those early years. I didn't... Like I said, I did not watch too much beyond the movie with Ivan Ooze and all that stuff. And I've got fond memories of going to see that movie. I know a lot of fans hate it, but... the thing I remember most about that movie was that there was one line that Rita Repulsa had in the film. You spent 2,000 years looking for a tub of snot. And I distinctly remember my dad, who was a saint, and we dragged him to a lot of shit when we were younger. And my dad, you were awesome, and I love you. And I'm sure he sat there the whole time with the Power Rangers movie just going, oh my god, this is shit. But... for that one moment, I turned over, my dad laughed at that line, and I will always remember that. I'm like, for that split second, Dad and I both enjoyed Power Rangers, and it's just one of those fond memories I have that I'll always remember. So even though a lot of fans hate the movie, I can't shit on the movie, because my dad, it gave my dad some level of enjoyment, and I know that we took him to a lot of shitty movies, but that was fun, and that's a fond memory I have. But beyond that, I kind of grew out of Power Rangers. I didn't watch too much beyond that. I'm sure Turbo was as bad as everybody says it is. I'm trying to remember if there was anything else I saw. I did see the big Red Ranger episode they did. I think that was for the 10th anniversary. But other than that, I don't think I watched any. I didn't watch the 20th anniversary special with the where they brought in all the old Rangers and had the big war. I haven't seen that. But I will say this, I have watched Linkara's History of Power Rangers video just to kind of get an abridged version of what happened after I stopped watching. And that was fascinating, and just to see what all the different shows did, and all the different characters and all the different villains they had. And to get that, again, that kind of abridged history of it, I think is really cool. And I thought, I was like, okay, thanks, Linkara. That's kind of awesome. Bring me up to speed on all the Power Rangers stuff I've missed. But, yeah, again, I was a Power Rangers fan back in the day. I fell in love with that original show, and that to me is the definitive version of Power Rangers. But it's really cool that it's kind of lasted as long as it has. You wouldn't think that it would have had that long of a lifespan, but again, when you take into account that Super Sentai had as many different incarnations that it had, you know, I guess there's a lot of material to work with there. But overall, I mean, I think it's pretty cool that Power Rangers has lasted as long as it has. And, you know, again, I think it's really interesting and very fun and very cool, but I'll always remember that original show and watching it as a very young child and just really being entranced with it. So, yeah, a lot of fond memories there with, you know, Go-Go Power Rangers and all that stuff. You know, there's this tendency to look at Lex Luger and Sid Vicious and just say that they suck. Personally, I'm not going to say they were two of my favorites, but I do think that there's more positives to them than people realize. Luger especially, because he was not that bad. It was like, everybody seems to label him as just pure dog shit, and I watched some of his old stuff, and I'm like, you know, he had his moments. I mean, okay, the Hulk Hogan Part 2 run that he had in WWF was a mistake, because the Narcissist was outstanding. I love that gimmick, and the fact that they dropped that still annoys me to this day. I thought that character was great, but you know, he got over. I mean, that's a part of the story that people don't remember, is that he did get over with the fan base at that point, with you know, during that period when it was hard to getting harder and harder to retain the fans. I mean, Luger for that brief period that he was pushed, I mean, they didn't boo him out of the building or anything like that. It wasn't like, it wasn't an obvious disaster or anything. It was just, you know, ultimately they just liked Bret more, and even Undertaker. But, you know, that run wasn't as horrible as everybody says it is, even though I do agree that it was a mistake. He did have a great match with Yokozuna at SummerSlam, I thought. That match is way better than you would expect it to be. Like I said, I love the narcissist gimmick, and the thing he did at WrestleMania 9 with that big entrance with the mirrors and the girls and everything, I thought was great, and he had a good match with Mr. Perfect on that same card, so, okay, that's fine. And then earlier on in his career, he had a run with the U.S. title that was very good. I thought he was quite good as U.S. champion back in those days. He had a feud with Sting for Super Brawl 2, I want to say. I want to say it was Super Brawl 2 because 3 was the strap match between Sting and Vader. But that feud was very good. So, I mean, Luger has his fair share of moments. And even one of my favorite moments in Nitro history was the match he had with Hogan where he beat Hogan for the title in '97. That was a huge shock. I was like, holy crap. And some of his stuff as a babyface feuding with the NWO was pretty good. So, Luger... You know, Luger, he's not one of the all-time greats in terms of his ability, but he definitely had his moments and could contribute if he was booked correctly. And again, you want to talk about a great look. I mean, he had a pretty good look. And actually, in a lot of ways, he had a better look than Hogan did. Because Hogan was kind of this... I mean, let's be honest, Hogan was kind of ugly. And had this weird mustache and was bald-headed and this weird skin color that was like, how much do you tan, dude? I mean... You know, seriously. I mean, Hogan was kind of ugly, and Lex had this chiseled body and the long blonde hair and everything else. So he arguably had a, you know, since we're in the age of Roman Reigns, we're focusing so much on looks. I mean, Lex Luger had a pretty damn good look. Among other things, and if put in the right position with the right booking, I felt like he could contribute. Sid Vicious, very limited worker. I'm not going to deny that. Not a whole lot he could do in between the ropes. However, what Sid did that not a lot of people realize is that he sort of redefined the big man in wrestling, because before Sid came along, most big men in wrestling were fat guys. And that could have varying degrees of success. Obviously, Bundy had his moments. You know, Earthquake, I think Earthquake is underrated, but you also had a bunch of other guys that were just there because they were fat. And that was what a super heavyweight was, just a big old fat guy. Sid was a complete powerhouse, but he had like a tall athletic look. He wasn't just a, you know, for lack of a better term, he wasn't a fat slob. He was a chiseled athlete and was very impressive athletically and had again, focusing on looks, he had a great look. And there weren't a whole lot of big men before him that had that type of look. And so to put him out there in big positions, it was like, oh my God, this is like a completely different type of big guy. And he was the first big guy that started using things like the choke slam and the power bomb on a mainstream level and really got over in that kind of main event character using those type of moves. Obviously, guys like Undertaker and Kevin Nash came around, and I would argue did it better, especially Undertaker. I would throw Kane up there as well. Big Show, I would throw him up there as well. You know, those type of guys would do those type of things better, but Sid was the first one that kind of broke that door down and kind of made that thing kind of work for big men. And again, kind of changed wrestling fans' perception of what a big man should be. Because, like I said, before him, most of them were fat slobs. And, you know, not that they were all untalented, but they were just big fat guys. And he was the one that kind of improved the look of the big man. And, yeah, those are the positives of Sid and Lex Luger. I would even throw Batista up there as one of those guys that kind of get shit on, and to some degree I can understand, but he had his moments. I thought his run on SmackDown in 2005 was very good. I mean, that's just me. I liked his run as a heel when he feuded with John Cena, even though I kind of accepted him as the babyface because it's Cena. But I thought that was quite good. His run in Evolution, where he was the enforcer of the group, I thought protected him very well. And he added to the group in that aspect. So, Batista, another guy, not the most talented dude in the world, but he had his moments. And you know, it's easy to just look at a guy and say, oh, that guy sucks, and I hate him, and he's fucking untalented, and he's just limited, and he's awful. But I'm like, I look at some of those guys, and like I said, Luger had his moments, Sid had his moments, Batista had his moments, and, you know, that's not a bad thing. Well, let's see here. Let's add this sucker off there. Yeah, I have the full franchise, the full film series on DVD. I have the full book series, the original Ian Fleming. You can't really see that right here. Yeah, this is the Ian Fleming book series as well. But, you know, the books are another discussion. The movies. Yeah, I have them all, and let's just skim over these real quick. I'm just trying to get like a quick refresher on all of them, just to kind of give my overall thoughts. Okay, all right. Basically, my favorite era for Bond is the Connery era. I think that was kind of just the most distinctive, the most classic. That version of Bond you'll never see again because it's so un-PC and so alpha male-like. You'll never see that type of Connery Bond ever again, and that's why it kind of stands out more to me. The plots are great, the villains are great. I just love them. To me, they're classic spy movies in every sense of the word. My favorite one that he did is Goldfinger. I love Thunderball. That's probably my number 2. From Russia with Love, very good. Dr. No, very good. You Only Live Twice, very good. Diamonds Are Forever, very good. I mean, really, Connery did not have a bad one. I don't think. I think all of his are great. If I were going to do a top 10, I'd say I'd probably put all the Connery films on there. That's how good they are. I really like them. Yeah, they're just really, 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 really good. The Roger Moore era, I liked Roger Moore. I thought he was very charming and very good. And that era was definitely cheesier, which had varying degrees of success. I like Live and Let Die. I think that one's good. I like Moonraker. I know everybody hates that one, but I think that one is so ridiculous and so over the top that it's just hilarious. That one I really like. My favorite one that Roger Moore did is I really like The Spy Who Loved Me. And actually, to compare it to the book, that's actually the worst book by far. And trust me, the only thing the movie and the book have in common is the title. But the book sucks, the movie's very good, and I think it's Roger Moore's best. A large reason for that is because of Jaws, who recently passed away. The actor did, unfortunately. But he's just a force of nature in that film, and I love him. And the plot is just classic, over-the-top spy movie stuff. I love the dynamic between Roger Moore and Agent Triple X, I should say. And I think that whole that whole character interaction I think is great. But Roger Moore also had some not very good ones. The worst one he did was A View to a Kill, which is kind of the Superman 4 of the Bond series. It's just, you know, Moore was getting too old for the part, and the movie is just incompetent on most levels. Namely, the leading lady. That might be the worst leading lady ever in a Bond film. I mean, she just had no chemistry with Moore at all whatsoever. You had Christopher Walken as the villain. He's supposed to be an ex-Russian agent, I think, and has no hint of a Russian accent at all. He's just Christopher Walken being Christopher Walken, which normally that's a really good thing, but for me it just kind of piles on the problems with this particular entry. I was not a big fan of For Your Eyes Only. Some people really like that one because it's the most serious of the Moore films, but I don't know. I didn't like it. To me, that one bores me. And the Ice Castles girl is really creepy because she, I don't know how old the actress was at that point, but she was, I think the character she plays is like 16 or something, and to watch her like creepily hit on Bond is just really kind of creepy to me. Thank God Bond never gives in, but I don't know, that one just never did it for me. And there's that whole thing about the leading lady wanting to kill for revenge, and Bond being like, no, you can't do that. And I'm like, dude, you kill people all the time. Who the fuck are you to stop her? You're like, God, man. But yeah, not a big fan of that one. I'm trying to think. The Man with the Golden Gun was disappointing, I will say. That one, because Christopher Lee's the villain and he's great, but you would think that that would be one of my favorites because of my man crush on Christopher Lee, but I don't know, that one just didn't work for me as well. I didn't like that the climax was in a fun house, and I didn't like other aspects to it. And Mary Goodnight is about the most useless leading lady ever in a Bond movie. she's it's not that the actress is bad, it's just that character is just completely useless. But in any case, and I'm going to get sidetracked on talking about villains and the Bond girls and everything, but yeah, we move out of the Roger Moore era. I like both Dalton films, but they both have their flaws too, so I'd say they're more middle of the road. I wouldn't put them up there as my favorites. And I do like Dalton as Bond, and I wish he had that, he'd just gotten one more crack at it to really have that great Bond film, but it never really happened for him. The Pierce Brosnan era, I hate all of the Pierce Brosnan films. Tomorrow Never Dies, I hate the plot. That the whole thing is basically just a ploy for ratings. I think it's just horrible. And the action scenes are way too goddamn long. World Is Not Enough is laughable. I mean, that's the one that everybody remembers for Denise Richards being a nuclear physicist, which is hilarious. Although the flip side of that, I think Sophie Marceau is actually the saving grace of that movie. I think she's great in it. But World Is Not Enough, didn't like it. And Die Another Day is arguably the worst. I think that one is a train wreck. From the very beginning with Madonna's song, which is by far the worst Bond song in existence. It is horrible. I mean, how the fuck did we go from Goldfinger to this crap? I don't know. But it's awful. Just truly terrible. So I hate all of the Pierce Brosnan Bond films, except for GoldenEye, which might be my #1 favorite. I love that one. And I think a large part of that has to do with the fact that it was the first Bond movie I ever saw. But, and obviously I was a big fan of the video game as well, but there's so many aspects of that movie that I love. The action's great. The plot, even though if you have any kind of economic knowledge at all whatsoever, the villain's plot is actually kind of, it wouldn't work. But if you're willing to ignore that, I think the plot is very good and the mystery is very good. All of the side characters are great. I think Xenia is my favorite Bond girl ever. She is just amazing. She's the female version of Jaws. And yes, I had a massive crush on her because she was a brunette. And that sex scene she had in the movie, I mean, okay, I first saw that movie when I was about 10 or 11, so I was just starting to enter puberty and stuff, and I'd already had a bunch of weird crushes on dark-haired women, so that scene messed me up royal. That's all I'm going to say about it. But, yeah, she did some weird things to me, and actually it explains some of my poor decision-making, some of my poor decisions that I've made through dating. I just get in these self-destructive situations because I found Zenyatta to be hot, so, obviously, hey, what's wrong with a crazy chick? Everything. That's the answer to that question. But yeah, she's great in it. I love her. I love Sean Bean as the villain, as Alec Trevelyan. He's great. And Pierce Brosnan, I like him as Bond. I think all of the Bond actors, except for Lazenby, I think all the Bond actors really bring something different to the role and really shine and really kind of put their own unique stamp on it. It's just a shame that Pierce Brosnan's era goes from one of the best entries, arguably my favorite, and then just turns into a complete shit show with the future entries. I don't know what happened. And if we're going to talk Bond songs, I think Tina Turner's GoldenEye is probably my favorite Bond song, because I hear that song, I just think spy movie. And there have been many great songs in the Bond series throughout the entire franchise. I already mentioned Goldfinger. You Only Live Twice had a great one. Duran Duran, View to a Kill. That one was great. Live and Let Die, that one's great. For Your Eyes Only, I bashed the movie, but I really like the song attached to that one as well. Skyfall had a great song, Adele. That one's fantastic. But yeah, I think that Tina Turner one, I think more than any other Bond song, I listened to that one, just the way it's sung and the music and everything, I just think spy movie more than anything else, and that song's great. But overall, I think GoldenEye is probably my favorite one, so that one's great. But moving right along, we've got the Daniel Craig era, which I really like Casino Royale. I think that one's a top 5, just for how it was really like the shot in the arm that the series needed, because it's so different from all the other entries, and it's not so much an action movie, but it has this great tenseness to it throughout. And those scenes at the poker table, I think, are as tense as any other great action scene you could come up with. I thought that entry was great. And Daniel Craig, again, I think he brings something different to the role. And I could talk about the specifics of what every actor brought to the role, but I'd be here all day. But I think he's great, and I really enjoyed the first entry. Quantum of Solace, I have absolutely no memory of that film, and I have watched it 3 times. It is probably the most unremarkable Bond film ever made because it leaves no impression on me. I have watched that son of a bitch film 3 times. I cannot tell you one fucking thing that happened. It just, I instantly forget about it after I've seen it. It's amazing. It's a marvel. I can't explain it. Quantum of Solace. Ask me what the plot was. I don't know. I can't tell you. I've watched the fucking movie 3 times. I don't know what to say. I don't know what to say. It's just, the movie, it leaves no impression on me. But they bounced back. I thought Skyfall was very good. I love the new take on Q. I love the new take on Moneypenny. The villain is great. Javier Bardem is just fantastic as that. And I think the movie might be a little bit too long. It's about half an hour longer than it needs to be. But overall, I thought it was just very, very good. And Judi Dench, who is by far the best M, I think. She's the only M that leaves any kind of an impression on me. And I just thought she's just this believably commanding force. It was a great last film for her. She's just outstanding as M. Anybody else playing M just feels wrong to me. It's just she's the best M. But it was a great last film for her. And now we have to look forward to Spectre, which is going to be kind of a throwback to the old days. We're getting Blofeld, and we're getting all sorts of great stuff. Batista's going to have a big role in it. I assume he's going to be the big henchman heavy in there. And, Spectre's coming back, so it's going to be kind of a throwback to the old Bond films, and I'm kind of looking forward to it. I want to see more. And hopefully that film turns out really well, because I think the more I hear about it, the more I like. So I think it has a chance to be really good. But overall, the Bond series, my favorite ones, I love the Connery era, especially GoldenEye and... Goldfinger, I should say. Goldfinger and Thunderball. I think those are the 2 best from the Connery era. From the Moore era, I really like Live or Let Die, and his best one by far is The Spy Who Loved Me. Love that one. GoldenEye is probably my #1 favorite, and I love Casino Royale. Those are the best of the best to me. The worst ones would be Die Another Day, View to a Kill, Quantum of Solace, and For Your Eyes Only. I just wasn't a big fan of it, sorry. And then the rest of the Brosnan era. So, long explanation to get to what you originally asked, but there it goes. I'm a James Bond fan, what can I say? At this point, I'm not really sure. I'm just kind of hoping and praying that they can get past WrestleMania 31, and then after that, everything kind of improves. I would probably book... I would definitely, if they don't already, have a big plan for Seth Rollins to go in as the heel champion. Whoever he ultimately faces, whether it be somebody like Dean Ambrose or Roman Reigns or Daniel Bryan or Dolph Ziggler, anybody they can come up with, whatever, John Cena, whatever. I think Seth Rollins should be prepared to be the top heel champion heading into WrestleMania. That's my idea. But, as far as Hall of Fame entrants go, I would start thinking Rick Rude. I think it's long overdue for him. I think Rick Rude should definitely go in. I would say Owen Hart, but I think his wife is in the way of that. And to be fair to her, I can kind of understand why. But I don't think Owen's a possibility. But I would definitely pitch it, if nothing else. I'm trying to think, and I would also put Sting and Undertaker in there. I know they're going to want to do that match next year. I know, but I'm like, nah, I'm kind of ready for. Let's say goodbye to Sting and Undertaker at this point. I think, that's just me. Anybody else? I'm trying to think of somebody else that should definitely go in that isn't in there yet. Since they've been putting in so many people from outside of the WWE, maybe you may want to consider putting Great Muta in there or something. I think that'd be really cool. But You know, kind of think outside the WWF box a little bit and start going outside. But yeah, I would probably be thinking along those lines. Vader's another one that should definitely go in. For Sting and Vader, Sting and Vader winning in the same year, that'd be really cool. But yeah, those are some of the names that I would be playing with as far as Hall of Fame entrants go. One thing that I'm actually trying to do right now is trying to get into better shape. I've actually started weightlifting again. I haven't done that since high school. Just certain things, now that I have the extra time living closer to work, you know, I've kind of started thinking, like, well, what can I do to fill that extra time? Well, I can actually start going to the gym and getting healthy again. So that's something that I'm looking forward to really, and I've been doing it the last few weeks, but yeah, it actually feels good. I actually kind of like it. It's not that I'm ripped or anything, but I actually feel better, and it feels nice, actually. One other thing that I want to try and do, and this is going to make me sound like a complete wuss, but I don't care. I have a paralyzing fear of mice and rats. I hate them. I am scared to death of them. If you want to see a shit show, throw a mouse in the middle of the room and watch me scream like a 10-year-old girl. I hate the fucking things. I just fucking hate them. And I finally gotten to a point where it's like, you know what, I want to try and beat it. So I've been thinking about trying to find ways to kind of not get to a point where I can, like, fucking hold a mouse in my hands and not freak out, because I don't want to ever get to that. I don't want to ever touch the fucking things. But get to a point where if one scurried past me, I wouldn't freak the fuck out. And I'd be able to compose myself. So I'm thinking about, like, start off by going to pet stores and stuff and, like, looking in mice and rats and cages and trying not to fucking freak out. But goddamn, the things just scare the fuck out of me. It's really something, and it is kind of embarrassing, but at the same time, I've finally gotten to a point where it's like, you know what, I kind of want to beat it. So that's something I'm gonna work on sometime this year. But we'll see how it goes. The biggest problem with this year's WrestleMania is the fact that the main event doesn't have a protagonist that the fans like. And that'll pretty much kill your story right there. If the fans are not invested in the protagonist that you have set up to take down your ultimate bad guy, then you're fucked. I mean, that's just what it is. And there are other problems with this year's WrestleMania that I could point to, and I probably will when I do my preview, but right now, that's the biggest one right there, is that you have this main event, it's your big world title match, and nobody seems to give a shit about the main protagonist of the story. And, you know, stories don't work if you don't care about who the story is about, right? No, I don't. I'm way behind on next-gen consoles. I don't have an Xbox One. I just got a Nintendo 3DS. I got that a few months ago, and that was the first, like, the newest video gaming thing I've gotten since the Wii came out, and I only got the Wii to play Mario and Zelda. So that tells you where I am with video games. But yeah, sorry, don't have a PS4. There are almost too many to count. I would have loved to have been there for Hogan Andre and Savage Steamboat at WrestleMania 3. Would have loved to have been there for a lot of the Austin McMahon stuff, namely the Zamboni incident. I would have killed to be in that crowd that night. Like Austin Brett would have been a good one to be in the crowd for. I'm trying to think. Hogan Rock would have been amazing to see in person. Again, just to be a part of that insane crowd. Money in the Bank 2011, just to see CM Punk beat Cena and walk out with the title, that would have been incredible to be a part of. I'm trying to think. Some of Sting's stuff in WCW, namely, my favorite one was the Sting Army. That would have been great to be in the crowd while all that craziness was going on. Or even Uncensored 97 when he came back and finally attacked the NWO. That would have been awesome to be a part of. Or, you know, to throw more Sting love. Any of the Sting Vader matches, to see one of those in person, I think would have been great too. So, I mean, there's so many great moments and matches in wrestling's history that I would have loved to have been there to see. But that's a short list of just only a handful of the ones that I would have loved to have experienced live in person. I think that's part of why they haven't fired him yet. I don't know if they'll never fire him or anything, but I think having those 2 Super Bowl wins has kind of like earned him a lot of cred with the Giants front office, and they're not willing to just willy-nilly let him go. I want Tom Coughlin to retire with us. I would love that if he retired head coach of the New York Giants and kind of went out the right way. Unfortunately, the last couple seasons have not been very good, so it kind of makes me wonder how much longer is he going to stick around. Also, Tom is not a spring chicken either, and he's at that retirement age as well. So, I mean, I love Tom Coughlin to death. He's probably my favorite coach that the Giants have ever had. It's either him or Parcells, who are my favorite coaches. But I love Tom Coughlin, and I think he's been great for the organization overall. The last couple of seasons haven't gone our way and haven't been very good, but regardless of how this season turns out, if this is his last year, he's had a great run with us, and I'll always remember the good times with Tom. But I do think that the front office is hesitant to let him go because of those 2 Super Bowl wins. How much freedom is that going to buy him? I don't know. I don't want to say it's an indefinite thing that they'll never fire him because of those 2 Super Bowl wins. Because if Jerry Jones came in, first thing he did was fire Tom Landry, which that seems like sacrilege, but to do that. But nothing's impossible. But I do think Tom has earned a fair. He's got a bit of a shield with those 2 Super Bowl wins. It's just a matter of how long are the Giants organization, how long are they going to be willing to let him ride that? We'll just have to wait and see. Or maybe you just come back and win a 3rd one. Who knows? Always be optimistic. Always be optimistic. Well, I kind of alluded to it earlier, but you're always going to have those WWE fans that will love the WWE no matter what. So they just, they're the first wrestling company that a majority of people see. That's how most people get into professional wrestling. So there's always going to be that kind of nostalgic feeling for the WWE, because that was how you first found pro wrestling, for most fans anyway. And because of that, they're always going to get at least a little bit of a slide from a lot of people. TNA does not have that built-in fan base, does not have that built-in brand recognition, and does not have the same love and appreciation because of that. And whenever they fuck up and do something wrong, the people don't tend to cut them any slack. And I don't think they deserve to cut slack. I try to be as fair as possible. I'm not here to bash TNA mercilessly. I'm not here to bash WWE mercilessly. And I'm not here to give either one blind praise either. I try to look at this objectively. It's like, look, this show sucked for this reason, whatever. Or this show was good for this reason and this reason. That's why. I try not to let nostalgia or any kind of ulterior motive or reasoning kind of take over. I try and just look at it objectively and be like, look, the show's not entertaining. It's just not. I don't care what your past was. I don't care what you're promising me for the future. I'm just telling you that right now the show's just not good. And I'm not liking it. And I try to be as fair as possible to all the wrestling companies. And, yeah, that's just what I try to be. And some people... with TNA, like I said, TNA doesn't have that same aspect to it that WWE does, and they also don't have the thing that a company like ECW or Ring of Honor does, where you have that passionate, loyal fan base that creates that kind of rebel atmosphere that company has. TNA doesn't have that either. They're just kind of a company that tried to start up and take WCW's place, and because of that, they just don't have the same loyalty from a lot of the fans. But right now, I mean, the product has been so kind of lackadaisical and so just uninteresting that it's hard to blame people for bashing them. Although I did like last week's show, as I said. But you know, it's one of those things. It is what it is. Yeah, they do, and part of the problem is not so much that they remake everything, it's that they remake everything so shitty and so boring. You know, if you look in the 80s, you know, there were plenty of remakes that came out back then, too, like John Carpenter's The Thing, and The Fly, and Scarface, which I just heard is getting remade again, but the original, the Al Pacino Scarface is a remake of a film from the 1930s. Not many people know that, but it actually is a remake. But it's so different and so stylistically unique compared to the original film. And I have seen the original Scarface, and I do like it. I don't think it holds a candle to the Al Pacino version, but it is very good. And yeah, the goals seem to be in the 80s to, if we're remaking a film, it's going to be different. And it's going to be, we're going to try and create a different experience using a similar story, similar setup, or whatever. Some of the same characters. But overall, we're going to try and make a different movie. Nowadays, they just remake the same damn movie. And it's like, what's the point? Like, Carrie, it's the same movie. Why even bother with a remake? Just go watch the original. Total Recall. They made the same exact movie, but without Arnold. So it's nowhere near as fun. Just go watch the Arnold version. It's fine. And now, obviously, I went on a rant about Secret of Nim and how they're remaking that. I know that movie's going to be shitty. I just know. And I keep hearing that Ghostbusters is going to be rebooted, and I feel like Ghostbusters should be kind of left alone. To me, Ghostbusters kind of died with Harold Ramis. That's just me. I could be wrong. I mean, the all-female Ghostbusters might work. I don't know. Apparently they have several reboots planned, but I don't know. It might work. I'm not hopeful, and I'm not going to hold my breath expecting a good one. But it is kind of weird. You look at this year's movie list and some of the things that are coming out. Like probably the two movies that are most interesting to most people are like the Jurassic Park movie and Star Wars Episode 7. And it's like, oh, okay, you know. It's really strange. And then as far as superhero movies go, obviously Marvel is kind of owning the world right now as far as box office and cinematic success goes. But, I mean, Marvel's just kind of doing their own thing. So we can say it's like, yeah, they're relying too much on superhero movies. But, you know, Marvel is... they're doing fine with what they're doing. So as far as I'm concerned, until they start sucking, Marvel can just keep doing what they're doing. And DC, I'm like, look, I love a lot of your properties. Just basically just rip off Marvel. I don't care. Just make your characters work again. And Batman, Superman, I love Batman and I love Superman. I don't think that movie's going to be very good. I can be wrong. I can be wrong. I don't know. But yeah, there is kind of an over-reliance on remakes and reboots and even superhero movies to a degree. But there is a way to do those things and make it original and make it good and make it fun. And nobody seems to know how to do that. And that's what it comes down to. There just isn't any original thought. And that's part of the problem. And I don't want to say there's no original thought. Obviously, Birdman was a very good movie last year and really was unlike any other movie that I've ever seen before, especially in the way it was shot. So there is originality out there. It's just there isn't as much of it as there should be, especially for the amount of movies that come out every year. But it is what it is. I'm going to just keep saying that and throwing my hands up. But yeah. I don't think unnecessary matches is so much a problem now because, I mean, if you look at the Mania cards now, they usually only get about 8 or 9 matches on there on a 4-hour show. So it's not like they're overcrowding the cards. Back in the old days, you'd have like 14 matches and like 5 or 6 of them were just filler matches. But you need your filler matches. You need your breaks in between the big stuff. So I don't mind that as much. So I think part of what has hurt the modern day WrestleManias, and CM Punk touched up on this in his podcast with Colt Cabana, is that they focus so much on the part-timers and give them all the big spots that it kind of it creates this weird thing where the other pay-per-views don't matter because those part-timers are hardly ever on them, like Triple H, Rock, I guess we can throw Sting in there, Undertaker, a lot of those guys. I'd even throw Triple H in there. And because of that, it kind of makes it look like the only time it's really important is at WrestleMania time when all these guys are on the card. So it hurts all the younger guys because that are there all the time because their matches don't seem as special and they don't seem as important. And ultimately, it weirdly hurts so many things. But because they're not on TV that much and they're not there to build full stories all year long, it really hurts the build-up to a lot of these matches as well. And I think you're really seeing that this year where Bray and Undertaker really has no story. It's just Bray talking and cutting the same promo every week because he doesn't have an Undertaker to really bounce off of because Taker's not there. All sorts of weird stuff. A lot has been said about Brock Lesnar and being a part-time champion and him being off TV so often that it affects things. I think Lesnar is probably the least problematic out of all of them, but because there's at least this value to him being viewed as this unstoppable force, and they've gotten some pretty good stuff out of it. So I don't mind as much. Excuse me. But yeah, I've heard people talking about they want to do Rock and Triple H next year at WrestleMania. Who the fuck is that going to help? That match that I saw 8 billion times back when I was a teenager, and we want to do that again at WrestleMania? Are you kidding me? But yeah, Rock, that became a problem where, it worked the first time, but then they brought him back for 29 and nobody really seemed to care. And it's like, oh yeah, that part-time guy, he's the champion just so he can drop it to Cena and all that other stuff. We couldn't have CM Punk take his title reign up to 500 days and have the payoff be at WrestleMania. We couldn't do that. We had to have Rock Cena again. But I think that's more the problem. And actually, what you say about unnecessary matches, a lot of the matches seem unnecessary because the build-up is so shitty. Like, the Andre the Giant Memorial Battle Royal isn't that bad of an idea on its own. It's a good way to get guys on the card, good way to give somebody a Mania win and possibly use that as a springboard to build him up into something bigger. They tried to do that with Cesaro and then ultimately dropped the ball, and the ball fell off a cliff and, got eaten by sharks. But, yeah, so inherently it's not that bad of an idea, but I don't have any faith that they're going to do anything with the guy after they win with it, so it just feels unnecessary. Divas matches shouldn't be inherently unnecessary, but they're so underutilized and so underpushed most of the time that they do feel unimportant. We went through all those years where we had 2 world titles, and one world title seems vastly inferior to the other one, so those matches typically, didn't feel as important, and you could argue seemingly unnecessary. We had the ECW title defended at one WrestleMania, and that belt meant shit. I mean, that belt didn't mean a goddamn thing, so that felt unnecessary. And these are all matches that shouldn't feel unnecessary for one reason or another, but they do because of shitty booking. So really, I guess what it comes down to is that shitty booking is the problem. I would actually kind of want to see it just to see how on earth are they going to Americanize Gamera, because that to me is a Herculean task. I don't know if you can. I don't know if it's possible to Americanize Gamera and present him to an American audience and have them go, have them accept it. I just can't picture it. I think people in America would see a flying turtle and just be like, what the fuck is that? Like, see, me, I'm a nerd that likes kaiju films, so I look at a flying turtle and I go, yeah, that's what happens in these movies. It's normal. I mean, this is the country that, looked at Pacific Rim and was like, I don't think so. We should go see Grown Ups 2 instead. So I don't think, I'm not sure a Gamera movie would work in America. I would like to see them try. I wouldn't mind it, depending on who was making it. I think somebody like Guillermo del Toro, I think, would do a good job with it. The people at Legendary Pictures, you know, they've done a Godzilla movie, they've done Pac Rim, they've shown competence in doing giant monster movies, so maybe, you know, that studio knows what they're doing in terms of giant monsters, so maybe they can do a Gamera movie really well. I don't know. Like I said, I don't think American mainstream audiences would accept it, but I would probably get a kick out of it. So yeah, sure enough. Let's bring back Gamera, the friend of all children, and have him light up the American box office. That would be a hoot. I like them both. I think Bray Wyatt is the more complete talent when you look at his promo abilities and his ability to kind of convey his character and everything, even with weak material. I mean, his promos would be amazing if the content made any sense. But I blame that more on the writing than I do him. But I think Bray's the more complete talent. I think Luke Harper is, at least based on what we've seen on TV, he's just kind of a very good big man, but that's all we really know. Again, as far as promos go, not a whole lot there. Other than that, he is a really, really good big man and very impressive physically. I think there's a lot of untapped potential with him, absolutely. But overall, I think Bray is just the more complete overall package as far as the talent goes. Yeah, I have heard that Toho is interested in making Godzilla movies again, which I'm all for that. Which classic Toho monsters would I like to see come back? Well, their tendency, and I've talked about this before, but their tendency is to bring back Mothra, King Ghidorah, and Mechagodzilla. Those seem to be the ones that Toho always brings back, and I feel like we've kind of been down that road. We've seen that, and they're the ones that always get consideration. And I get it because they're the big stars. I understand that, but even in Godzilla 2, which Legendary's doing, you know, they're bringing in Mothra, King Ghidorah, and Rodan. And Rodan's the one I'm like, yeah, absolutely, bring back Rodan. But Mothra and King Ghidorah, I feel like, I've seen that before. Mechagodzilla, I've seen that before. I'd like to see Gigan come back and actually get to go up with Godzilla one-on-one in a significant fight, because Gigan is this great monster who has never gotten that chance to truly shine. In his first movie, he was the best part of a bad movie. In his second movie, he was a cheap excuse to use stock footage. And in Godzilla Final Wars, I thought he was going to get his big moment, but then Godzilla blew his head off, and then he killed himself at the end of the movie. So he got 2 undignified deaths in one movie. And it's like, come on, Gigan is so great. Can we get just one movie where he gets to deliver with Godzilla and just let it be awesome? I would love that. I would be all over that. I would love to see Anguirus come back. He's another one that doesn't come back nearly enough. As either a friend or foe to Godzilla, I'd be open with either. But love to see Anguirus back in the series. But the other ones that I would really like to see, and this touches up on the Heisei series, you know, a lot of those monsters haven't been seen in decades in movies. Destroya, it's been 2 decades since we've seen him in a movie. Biollante, it's been, since 1989 that Biollante has been in a movie, and that's arguably the best designed monster that Toho ever made. Hedorah from the 70s, one of my favorites that hasn't really come back since that original film. Outside of a very, 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 very brief cameo in Final Wars, Hedorah has never come back. So those are 3 monsters right there, Biollante, Destroya, and Hedorah, that I would love to see make a comeback. I'd like to see them do something with it, rather than, again, just going to Mothra and King Ghidorah again. I think there's, Toho's got a lot of great monsters. Toho has a great monster library to play with, and I think there's plenty of opportunities there. Actually, some classic monsters that they could use that have never faced Godzilla, they have the Gargantuas. They have never fought Godzilla in a movie. They've done it in the comics. They just recently did Godzilla Rulers of Earth in the comics, and Godzilla does fight the Gargantuas in that. But I think War of the Gargantuas is probably the most famous monster movie that Toho ever made that never crossed over into the Godzilla series. Well, I take that back. They did work War of the Gargantuas into the continuity for Godzilla versus Godzilla against Mechagodzilla and Godzilla Tokyo SOS, but you know, Godzilla never actually got to fight the Gargantuas, and I think that's something that they could do, and I think it would be very interesting, and I'd be totally open for it. I think it'd be great. Honestly, I kind of want to keep NXT as separate from the main WWE show as possible, because that would just kind of dilute and ruin everything for me. I kind of like NXT being on its own little island, so I probably wouldn't book I guess you could call it an interpromotional feud between the two. But if I had to, I'd probably book it in a way where a bunch of WWE guys, maybe they start off bringing up like a handful of the NXT guys, and the main WWE roster like disrespects them. It's like, oh no, you were in the little leagues, now you're in the big leagues, and we don't respect you or whatever, and then just kind of let it turn into a full-fledged thing that snowballs from there. That's probably how I would do the angle. What matches would I like to see? That's kind of tough. It's so weird because the guys in NXT wrestle such a different style. I mean, for lack of a better term, they're more of the indie style, and the WWE guys are, obviously more of the WWE style. But I'd kind of like to see, I don't know why, I would kind of like to see Dolph Ziggler go up against Kevin Owens, just because I just picture Ziggler bumping like mad for him, and I think it would be, I think they would have a natural chemistry that would work. I'd like to see Daniel Bryan go up against Kevin Owens. Again, the size difference I think would make a really good match out of it. I would like to see Sami Zayn go up against probably Daniel Bryan, actually I'd like to see them as a tag team, quite honestly, more than rather than opponents. There's not really a whole lot there in terms of like dream matches that I'd like to see. It's just, again, because I just kind of picture NXT as this own separate thing that I don't want to be intermingled with the main WWE show. Although I do think Paige versus Charlotte, now if I had to think of one, Paige versus Charlotte would probably be a very good one, because they're the two most dominant women's champions in the history of the brand. So I think that would be a really good match to have. That probably would have been my WrestleMania Divas match this year over this tag match that they've cooked up. But in any case, I think that would be a really good one. I think it's been great. I think Archer hasn't missed a beat. I think it's still a great show. I know a lot of people weren't too high on Archer Vice last season. I really liked it, but it was such a radical departure from what they'd normally done. I can understand why it would kind of rub people the wrong way. But this season has kind of been a return to more familiar stuff, even though it is very much focused on the relationship between Archer and Lana, and I think they've gotten a lot of great comedy out of that. I was talking to somebody about it the other day. The episode where Archer and Lana go to spend the day with Lana's parents might be the best episode in the history of the show. I mean, that was just, oh my god, it was so funny. It was, I can't even describe how awesome it was. And the whole season's pretty much been like that. Unfortunately, because they focus so much on Archer and Lana, like the rest of the characters feel like they're kind of in the background, not really having a whole lot to do. Even though their little B subplots are funny and they get a lot of good lines out of them, it's like they don't feel as integrated into the main show as they probably should be. But again, it's still funny. It's still great. I love the interactions between the characters, and I think the show's been very good. It's one of my favorite shows on TV, and it's still really funny, and I love it. So yeah, Archer, it's pretty awesome. To be perfectly honest, I love that match so much I would go as far to say that it's my favorite match in TNA history. I think it was just an outstanding cage match that was almost flawless. My only real knock on it would be in the early portion of the match, it follows straight tag team rules where they tag in and out, and to me, it's a cage match, so it should just be. And I know I knocked Red Dragon and the Young Bucks for just being this wild free-for-all with no tagging, but I think in a steel cage match, you really don't need to tag in and out. So that whole following that format early on seemed kind of pointless to me. But other than that, I thought it had everything that makes pro wrestling great. It had drama, it had action, it had violence, it had that insane top of the cage walk from Elix Skipper, which to this day is still one of the craziest things I've ever seen in pro wrestling. And it's funny because most of the time Elix would botch that spot when he would do it on the normal ring ropes. In normal matches, he would botch it. So thankfully he hit it in that case, because that was unbelievable and could have gone horribly wrong if he didn't hit it. But yeah, all four of those guys, Chris Harris, James Storm, Chris Daniels, Elix Skipper, that match was absolutely incredible, I think. It's one of the best cage matches I've ever seen, to be perfectly honest. And like I said, it had a little bit of everything that makes pro wrestling great, and I loved it. It had great heels, great faces. It had blood, it had guts, it had... I mean, I could sit here all day and talk about how much I love that match. And again, I think it's the best match the TNA's ever done. It also had the long build-up going into it because Triple X and AMW had been feuding for like a year and a half up to that point. And they had all this history, and this was the final showdown, the final encounter, and it was an appropriate closure to the feud, and really delivered in many, many, many ways. I remember when that pay-per-view first happened, that match just blew everybody's mind. Like, you couldn't even envision a tag team cage match being as good as this one. And it's funny because I didn't see their first cage match in 2003, but I'd heard about it, and I eventually saw it, and I think that the Six Sides of Steel match blows that match out of the water. And that first cage match is really good, but I think the Turning Point one completely outshines it. It is definitely a case where the sequel is superior to the original. And I love the match. I think it's great. It's tag team wrestling at its finest, and it was actually, back when I first started watching TNA in 2004, it was their tag division that got me hooked on the show. It was not the X division. The main event scene was still a little weak. Monty Brown hadn't quite... I mean, Monty Brown and Abyss were getting over, but they weren't like quite up to that main event level. So, really, it was their tag division that really got me going. And yeah, not that the X division was bad or anything. I actually enjoyed it, but their tag division just blew my mind. And this Six Sides of Steel match was just the perfect showcase for that. And it was just, it was incredible. I actually have not seen it yet. It's one of those movies from last year that I just haven't gotten around to seeing yet. It was that and The Imitation Game. Those were the two I really wanted to see, but I just haven't had time to give it a look yet. I've heard a lot of great things about it. Obviously, there was some controversy in, the news media and being all political about it, and Fox News is yelling one thing and everybody else is yelling another thing, and it's just, bleh, who fucking cares? It's just a movie. But yeah, I do want to see it at some point. I heard it was really good, so I'm sure I'll get around to it someday. Honestly, I was so sick of there being two world titles that by the time they eventually did it, and they had Cena and Orton unify them in that TLC match, I was like, fine, fuck it, I don't care, do whatever you gotta do. Anything to get rid of that second world title, just so we can get back to having just one. And I stand by that. I think it means so much more when there's only one world title, and especially since Lesnar's been off TV so frequently holding just the one belt, I do think it kind of makes it feel more special when it's actually defended. But yeah, we'll see what happens when Roman Reigns is champion. But yeah, what would I have done to unify the belts? I probably would have woven it in to the Daniel Bryan storyline, like have him win the world title at some point, and then somehow that leads to him at WrestleMania 30 being able to somehow con the Authority into giving him the shot against Orton, just to make it, title versus title, the winner becoming the undisputed champion or something like that. I think that would have been a really satisfying way to do it. I also probably would have held off until Lesnar ultimately won, and had him be the guy to unify the belts. One of those two. WrestleMania seems like it would be a really good place to unify the belts, though, so I'm more inclined to go with my idea with the Daniel Bryan thing, just because it is a big deal to unify your two biggest championships, and WrestleMania just seems like a really good setting to do that. So, yeah, that's probably what I would go with. Not the most creative answer, but like I said, I'm just happy that there's back to just being one world title again. It's so much easier that way. I think it's great. I think Spider-Man deserves to be back with Marvel, and the Marvel Cinematic Universe has, for the most part, done a really good job with its characters. So them getting somebody as big as Spider-Man, I think, is something that should have been happening all along, quite frankly. And I'm just happy that the Sony series with Andrew Garfield and all them, that it's done, it's buried, it's over. Let's just move on, because those movies just drove me nuts. The first one I hated because, and I seem to be the only one that points this out, but they made the same goddamn movie as the Raimi movie, and nobody seems to realize that. But, both movies ended with a funeral, both movies with him having to break up with his girlfriend. It was like, oh, I can't be with you because I'm Spider-Man, or whatever. Both movies had a big green villain that was the product of a science experiment gone wrong. Oscorp was central to the plot of both movies. It just blew my mind how... Uncle Ben dies in both movies. The origin story's done in both movies. I mean, it really is the same as the Raimi movie, only without the heart. But, so I didn't like the first one, and the second one was such a bombastic piece of shit that it was funny. I'll give it that. It was hilarious in how bad it was, but it wasn't very good, and I'm just happy that that series is over and done with. Who should play Spider-Man? Not Andrew Garfield. Just to close the... Not that I'm ragging on him as an actor, but just to close the door on that and just let it be over. Okay, no, we're done. We're moving on. Thanks, bye, see you later. God, I can't really think of anybody off the top of my head that I'd like to see play Spidey. I wouldn't mind if they just got a no-name. And they've done such a terrific job of casting their characters when you look at Robert Downey Jr. and Chris Evans as Cap and Chris Hemsworth as Thor and Mark Ruffalo as the Hulk and Scarlett Johansson as Black Widow. I mean, they've done such a terrific job of casting people. Oh, Loki. What's that dude's name? Name's escaping me. Tom Hiddleston. Yeah, he's terrific. Where the hell did he come from? I don't know, but they do such a great job with casting that I'm not so much worried about that at this point. I just don't want any remnants from the Sony films to be involved in this at all whatsoever. And hopefully they don't redo the origin. I feel like we already have 2 origin movies. We know where Spider-Man came from. Just jump into the story. Just assume that we know who Spider-Man is, where he came from, and who Peter Parker is and everything, and just go from there. That's what I would prefer. But in any case, I'm more excited for Spider-Man's cinematic future now than I was a year ago when Amazing Spider-Man was getting ready to come out, and I was like, I don't think this movie's going to be very good. And then sure enough, I was right. But I'm just happy that that's over and done with, and I'm willing to give Marvel a chance to see what they can bring with the character and how they utilize him. So yeah, let's bring it on. Because the Royal Rumble is such an important part of building towards WrestleMania, I doubt that there will ever be a situation where the Royal Rumble is not one of the top 4 events of the year. It's like I said, it's so important to the build-up that I don't see that ever really going away. But then again, who knows? I've made it perfectly clear my thoughts on the last few Rumbles, not just the last 2, but pretty much ever since Del Rio won. The Royal Rumble has just been a misfire almost every year, and I just got to shrug my shoulders and go, I don't know what's going on here. So personally, my ability to get excited for the Royal Rumble has diminished significantly over the last few years. Survivor Series has been kind of... although they did a better job with this last one, with the Survivor Series match they did, but... the idea of the elimination matches has been devalued so much that it's really hard to think of that show as a top 4 anymore. It's really only designated as a top 4 because it was one of the top 4 before they started doing one pay-per-view a month. That's really the only thing that keeps it into that block. I mean, personally, I think Money in the Bank is more significant at this point than Survivor Series. And Survivor Series should be a big show. It should be a cool concept. It should be, be something to look forward to every year, but they do so much to diminish it that it feels so unimportant. I mean, with all the tag matches they do on Raw that mix and match single stars, they've done elimination matches on Raw before. They had bragging rights for a couple years, which had a Raw versus SmackDown elimination tag match. They've done so many things to kind of devalue what made the original Survivor Series event so cool, because I'll never forget it. That 1989 show, when I saw Hogan, Jake Roberts, and Demolition all on the same team, I was like, I have to watch that. I have to watch that, because I never saw them interact with each other. Hogan and Jake rarely ever shared screen time together. And nowadays, with the oversaturation of television and everybody interacting with everybody on TV every week, you don't get that same level of speciality to it. So the Survivor Series concept has diminished significantly. So in my mind, it is hard to think of that one as a big four. Although, like I said, this last one they did a better job with it than what they normally do. But I think Survivor Series has already kind of been demoted, at least in my mind. Royal Rumble, no matter how bad it gets, never will be, just because it's such a key component in building towards WrestleMania. You know, it's weird. Most of my favorite finales actually come from comedies, because in the case of a lot of dramas, the dramas get to a point where the storylines kind of jump the shark a little bit. So by the time the finale rolls around, I usually don't care anymore. But comedies, I don't know. There's just something about comedies that seem to work better in delivering a nice, satisfying finale to the whole show. Probably the best one that I've ever seen is probably the Mary Tyler Moore Show. I think that ending is so emotional and so funny as well. It gets plenty of laughs, but at the same time, it's so heartbreaking and so emotional that it really leaves an impression. And I remember watching that show on Nick at Night, and when I saw that episode for the first time, I started to tear up a little bit. Given how everything ended, I think that's a magnificent finale. Trying to think of some other ones. I would throw Breaking Bad up there to throw a dramatic one that did work, even though in my mind Ozymandias is the true finale and the final two episodes are just kind of a extended epilogue, a very good epilogue, and like I said, the finale is very good and very satisfying, but to me, Ozymandias is the episode that everything was building to. So, in my mind, that is kind of the finale, and it's the best episode in all of Breaking Bad, and the two episodes that followed are a really good epilogue. So, whether you view Ozymandias as the finale like I do, or you view the true last episode is the finale, both of those are very good. So, Breaking Bad is a damn near perfect show anyway. But, yeah, are there any others? This one might sound weird. I think the ending to Golden Girls is actually, again, very funny, but also has that big emotional gut punch to it that actually really works. And I watched Golden Girls a lot when I was a kid. Probably shouldn't have been, because there's a lot of dirty content in it. But, yeah, I really like the finale to that show, too. What are some other good ones? Actually, I was just I was on a bit of a nostalgia kick lately. I started rewatching Mighty Max, a cartoon from the 90s, which if you remember Mighty Max, God bless you. But the finale to that show is one of the most bizarre that I've ever seen. So much so, I don't know if it's terrible or if it's brilliant. I can't really decide yet. And I don't want to give it away either. So if you remember the show and you saw the episode, you know exactly what I'm talking about. But the finale to that show is really odd. Really, really weird. But while we're on the subject of children's shows and, like, you know, children's animation and everything, Avatar: The Last Airbender had an awesome finale. I mean, that 4-part finale is so cinematic and so brilliant, then really ties together all the storylines and everything and gives everything all their proper payoffs. That finale can't be overlooked. I think that one's fantastic. There were a couple of things I wish had happened, but overall, I thought it was very, very well done. It was overall very, very satisfying. I love the finale to Duckman. Which, again, that's another one of those cartoons from the 90s, which if you remember it, God bless you. But it was more of an adult cartoon with Jason Alexander as the voice of the titular character. That show has the most deliberate, middle finger in your face, fuck you ending I have ever seen to a TV show, and I kind of love it for that. And this one I am going to give away because it's so amazing. But throughout the entire show, we've been led to believe that Duckman's wife is dead. And that's something, he's a single father, and he lives with his wife's sister and the rest of his family to help raise the kids or whatever. And it's really kind of this fucked up, dysfunctional family because, you know, everything had to mimic The Simpsons back then, and everybody was dysfunctional. But it was a really funny show and really kind of cynical and sarcastic, and I really loved it. And in the final episode, Duckman gets married, and it's like a triple wedding where one other character gets married, and I think Duckman's original sister-in-law gets married, and his partner Cornfed gets married, and it's this really big ceremony to end the show. And they make you think that that's how the show's going to end. And then right before this episode ends, Duckman's thought-to-be-dead wife walks into the church. Duckman, why are you getting married? What's going on? And Duckman's like, I thought you were dead. And then she goes, I had to go away. Didn't Cornfed ever tell you? And Cornfed has been Duckman's partner throughout the entire show. And then the show literally ends with Cornfed going up to Duckman going, all right, Duckman, there's something I have to tell you. And it zooms in on Duckman's face, and that's the end of the show, and there's no ending. That huge bomb just gets dropped on us, and we have absolutely no idea where it came from. And it is such a deliberate just fuck you right in your face, and I kind of love it for that. But at the same time, it pissed me off when I saw it. I'm like, are you joking with me? That's the last episode? Jesus Christ. That is so mean, but again, it's so funny at the same time. But yeah, if I had to list a favorite series finale, I would go for the Mary Tyler Moore Show. That's the one that stands out the most to me, anyway. When I think of truly great, truly memorable finales that just gave a satisfying closure to the whole show, it was funny, it was heartfelt, it was heartbreaking, and just really had a ton of emotions around it. It was overall just a great finale. And one more that I wanted to throw in there, I actually forgot to add this in when I was giving my answer initially, so I'm just filming this and putting this in now. The finale to Newhart is also brilliant. It's one of the most famous television finales of all time. It is absolutely amazing and really funny, and just really, just a really funny way they decided to end the show. And just overall, it's just brilliant. And like I said, it is one of the most famous TV finales of all time, and it's amazing. Again, I don't want to give it away, but I'm sure if you know about it, you know exactly what I'm talking about. But I thought the finale to that show was also fantastic. I think the idea of AJ Styles being their guy and their homegrown, flag bearer, the guy that was the Grand Slam champion that's shined in the tag division, the X division, and the eventually the main event scene. I think that was all very good, and that's how I would have presented him as well. It's like we got to pick one guy to kind of be our own homegrown mega hero, and I thought AJ was a perfect fit for that. His style was so unique, at the time, and I thought he had he was marketable, he had all these other intangibles that made him really likable, and was damn good in the ring and could mix it up in just about every situation that you put him in. So I thought he was a perfect pick for that. And I thought as far as booking him like that goes, I thought they did a decent job of picking him for that spot. I probably would have avoided certain things with him, certain angles that he did, like the Claire Lynch thing. Stuff like that. I would have gone in different directions with certain things. I probably, there was a tendency to have him job out to the ex-WWE and ex-WCW guys. I probably would have curtailed that a little bit. But other than that, I mean, just the spot that they had for AJ being their big homegrown flag bearer, I thought was a great spot for him, and that I would have just booked to accentuate that and keep him out of some of those dumb situations that they put him in from time to time. I think Ben Affleck has proven himself to be a good actor if you see movies like Argo and stuff like that. He's actually not a bad actor, and it was certainly better than the reputation he had about a decade ago. I mean, yeah, people can say he's a shitty actor, but you watch a movie like Geely, which I have sat through, and it's like, I don't think anybody could have made that good. I mean, that was just a stupid movie, among other things. But I think Affleck is not a bad choice. We'll see. It's one of those things. We'll just wait and see. I'm more worried about other things like the writing, the script, how many characters do they plan on cramming into this goddamn, this first movie, this Batman-Superman movie. I just don't know. And there's so many questions, so many question marks all over the project that I'm just kind of like, I'm approaching it with some trepidation. I'm like, oh God, this could be a disaster. And I hope it's not. I want it to be good. I want, DC to actually, get a bit of a foothold on the cinematic aspect of things and actually get back to making really good movies. I've said it before, I liked Man of Steel overall. I didn't hate it, but there's definitely room for improvement. And most of what I've heard about this upcoming movie doesn't really have me all that excited, namely just the idea that they're trying to cram so much shit into one movie. But again, we'll see, and hopefully it's able to springboard into something bigger and better from there. That is very hard. I had a tough enough time answering what my favorite WWF pay-per-view from the Attitude Era was. So to broaden that scope all the way to every wrestling pay-per-view ever and say which one my favorite is, I mean, that's very hard to make a pick there. I won't say it's like the best show ever, but it's probably the show I have the most fondness of, and that's SummerSlam 1991. And the reason I have the most fondness of that show is because it was the first wrestling pay-per-view I ever saw, not in person, I wasn't there, but it was the first wrestling show I ever saw live on pay-per-view. So I've got so many fond memories of the excitement and sitting around all weekend long, or even actually, I remember they were showing commercials for it like all month long, if memory serves me right. And just sitting in front, watching the pay-per-view channel, and just waiting to see more commercials for SummerSlam, because Mom and Dad had already decided. It's like, yeah, we're gonna order SummerSlam for you. So I was really excited, and I've just got so many fond memories of the whole thing. And I've watched that show recently, and I think it's still a really good show. The main event's a little weak, the handicap match and the finale, but other than that, I do think it's a really strong show. With a lot of good matches and great payoffs, but just all the nostalgia that's associated with that pay-per-view and the whole experience of it for me at 6 years old was pretty phenomenal, and I'll always remember that. And that's something that no other pay-per-view I've ever seen has attached to it. No other pay-per-view has. You never forget your first, right? So, that one I've got a lot of fond memories of. If they go the CGI route, I hope they're able to get it to a point where the CGI is acceptable, because, as I said in my movie reviews, the CGI that they used in the Millennium films was just god-awful for the most part. So, hopefully, if they go the CGI route, they're able to significantly improve what they did. I know there was a Toho movie where Godzilla had a cameo in, like, 2007 or something, and that CGI Godzilla didn't look too bad, although that was only for a few seconds as well. I don't know if they could get an entire movie out of it, but there's that part of me that's just always clinging to the old ways. And even after watching the 2014 Godzilla movie, as good as it was, and as much as I enjoyed it, and even as much as I enjoyed Pacific Rim, I'm just sitting there the whole time, just thinking, man, I think I would like this more if it was men in rubber suits. It's just you can't. It's just, men in rubber suits, it just looks more organic when you actually have something there in front of the camera. Because, you don't have to account for, lighting or any of that other stuff, because it's all right there for you, and you don't have to worry about manipulating all of that. And the mass and the weight of the creatures, that's very hard to capture with CGI creatures. Not impossible. Jurassic Park did it, Pac Rim did it, 2014 Godzilla did it. But it is still very, very hard to do. And to make those creatures just seem massive and seem like they're just carrying all this weight. And I felt like that was something that was always done better with men in rubber suits. Just making them look and feel like massive just massive, massive creatures. And there's that part of me that will always just be like, man, I want it to be a man in a rubber suit. So if you ask me what I want it to be a man in a rubber suit, because to me that's always the best Godzilla. But I think they're probably going to go the CGI route. I just hope that if they do go the CGI route, they're able to make it look good. Given the situation we have right now, I would have Rusev go over Cena, have one of the popular baby faces win the ladder match, which would be Daniel Bryan, Dean Ambrose, or Dolph Ziggler, and then eventually build to a unification match between those two winners. That's not going to happen because we all know John Cena is going to beat Rusev. I do think one of the baby faces is going to win the ladder match, but I don't think a unification match will necessarily be in the cards. It could very well be, but who knows? I think getting back to having less championships, I think would make being a champion mean so much more. And I think if you keep Rusev going as this unbeaten monster that got through John Cena twice, it'll make whoever beats him in the unification match, presumably if the idea is to have the babyface win the unification match, I might even have Rusev win that match and ultimately become the unified mid-card champion. Just keep him rolling because he's the most well-established heel they have in terms of like credibility. I mean, the motherfucker wins all the time, so why ruin that now just to feed the John Cena train? I don't see the value in it, but that would be at least my short-term thinking plan. Like, all right, you've got these two title matches here at WrestleMania. Let's eventually plan down the road to have a unification match between the two winners coming out of WrestleMania here. And I would, if I were in any way involved in creative, I would be lobbying so hard for Rusev to beat Cena. But, you know, those are going to fall on deaf ears, I think. I don't really have a preference. I think there's a benefit to either way. Low budget, kind of smaller films kind of have this homemade kind of, if they're done well, kind of have this really good, well-made, kind of, you know, working within whatever restrictions they have, kind of charm to them. Or, you know, they feature really great performances or focus really well on, like, writing and story or whatever. And I think low-budget films can be very, very good. Independent films can obviously be very, very good. I mean, look at movies like... I mean, I know it's a dick and fart joke movie, but look at Clerks and what Kevin Smith was able to do with that very small budget and such limitations at his disposal, and he was able to create a comedy classic. But then you look at big blockbusters, like going all the way back to the biblical epics of like Ben-Hur and the Ten Commandments, and today, I mean, the equivalent of that would be like The Lord of the Rings and you know, the Marvel movies and Harry Potter and all that stuff. They're those big event movies that you have to see in the theater. That where being in the theater really enhances the experience. So a really good blockbuster or a really good low-budget film, I don't care as long as the movie's good. And I think you can get different experiences out of either one. And on the flip side, a bad blockbuster can be a complete waste of time and a movie ticket, and a bad low-budget film will be a waste of time spent on Netflix or whatever method I use to watch it. So, yeah, I really don't have a preference to either way, but there's different things I get enjoyment out of in the way both of those type of films are done. I would go for something more hard rockin', like Back in Black by AC/DC, or I Love It Loud by Kiss, or Burn in Hell from Twisted Sister, or something by Black Sabbath, or something by Motley Crue. Just something like really hard-hitting and really kind of loud, and something I could headbang to, and that would be my main reason. I don't know why. If I'm coming out to a song, I would want to be able to headbang to it, although I really can't headbang because I don't have the hair, but, you know... just something like that. I do like that type of music, and it would be infectious for me, and I think if it would energize me and get me pumped up, that hopefully I could be able to pump up the crowd as well while I'm making my entrance. So that's more along the line of thinking that I would be. I haven't, but now that you mention it, I will get around to checking that out and see what that channel's all about. So thanks for the recommendation. You know, whenever they do a king gimmick, I just start laughing because it really does feel like a cheap excuse just to give somebody a silly costume. And it's really all the king gimmick ever really amounts to. I felt the same way about Sheamus when they tried to make him King Sheamus. And I made the joke that he looked like Tim the Enchanter from Monty Python and the Holy Grail. Yeah, it doesn't really add anything to the character. It's just a silly costume that they wear. And yeah, Booker did get a world title run out of it, but if you look at the SmackDown roster at that point, he was really the only one that could carry that belt. That roster got so depleted that year. It was laughable. So really, whether he was in the King gimmick or not, Booker probably would have gotten that belt anyway. So I don't know. It just didn't really do it for me. The only times the King gimmick ever really worked, I think Jerry Lawler. Just because he played it to the friggin' hilt and made it his own, and Macho King Randy Savage, just because Savage is so uniquely odd that him being like the Macho King seemed to be just perfect for him. I don't know why, he just made it work. I think Parasite would be a very good one, mainly because he's a big physical match for Superman. And, you know, given that his whole ability is that he can absorb Superman's life energy and stuff. So I think he would be a good match for him. Metallo would be a great one. A robot that's powered by kryptonite. I mean, come on, that writes itself. I think Bizarro would be an interesting one to do. It would be a little hard, but I think they could do it. If you handle everything correctly, I think he'd be a fun one. Brainiac, obviously, is the biggest one to not be in a movie yet, arguably. I think he'd be really good. And I think obviously the biggest one, and I think they want to save this for Justice League, but Darkseid, I think, would be a great one to do. Darkseid is the most cinematic villain in the history of comic books that has not been in a movie yet. And the fact that Thanos has been in movies before Darkseid just blows my mind. It's just, you would have thought that DC would have gotten around to Darkseid first, especially when the Superman animated show came out and the Justice League show was out. You would have thought that Darkseid would have been in a movie by now, and it never happened. It never fucking happened, but hopefully they get around to that at some point. I would argue that maybe this WrestleMania would have been the year to do it. I think, you know, it would have been kind of the big payoff to breaking up the Shield last year, is to do this kind of long build-up heading into WrestleMania where all three of them eventually face each other on the grand stage. I think that would have been a really good match to do at WrestleMania, but they were so dead set on putting Roman Reigns in the main event, whether we liked it or not, that it's, you know, that got fucked up. But they should think about doing it sometime soon, because you want to do it while all three guys are still in the limelight. You don't want to do it when, you know, and I don't want to assume this, but Dean Ambrose, like, when he's fucked up beyond repair. Hopefully that doesn't happen, but you can't help but have that idea creep into your brain. You don't want to do it like 3 years from now. You want to do it like, I would say, within a year after the breakup. I would say so. Within the next few months, maybe that could be a pay-per-view main event after Roman wins the belt. Who knows? But we'll see. But yeah, they might want to think about doing that match soon. I have seen it, and I do like it. They've done a lot of like really funny things with it that either call back to the original show that I grew up with, or they've done a lot of like movie parodies with it. They went on a stretch there where they were bound and determined to reference every horror movie from the 1980s or something, and it was actually kind of funny the way they did some of it. And I think it's a funny show. I think it's a good show, and it's a cool continuation of Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. I'm not a fan of the way the show looks. That kind of very round, kind of clunky CGI that they do, but I mean, it's not awful, but I'm just not overly fond of the way it looks. But that's just me being an old fart, I think. They just recently introduced Bebop and Rocksteady into the show, which I think is kind of cool, and I was like, yay, Bebop and Rocksteady finally came back. So I really do like that. I like this show's version of Shredder. I like all the Turtles as normal, and they've done some pretty cool things in bringing back some of the lesser-known characters. Like, the way they did Mutagen Man was kind of surprisingly good, I thought. And Mutagen Man was not a character that had a whole lot of fanfare back in the day. I think he was only in one episode of the original show, and he didn't have the best origin story. He was one of the coolest toys, but didn't have one of the best origin stories in the cartoon. I don't know how he was done in the comics. I couldn't tell you if he was in the comics at all. But, just a lot of things here and there that they do that are really funny and creative. And it's overall a pretty good show, I think. If you had asked me that 5 years ago, I would have told you no, but, I mean, lately they've been bringing in guys that I never thought they'd bring in, like Kevin Steen. I never thought he'd ever be in the WWE, so, again, who knows. I doubt AJ ever will. I just feel like AJ's got plenty of other options out there besides going to WWE, and he's great in New Japan and everything, so he very well could, but I don't see it happening. And the Young Bucks, I'm also I doubt it because A, the WWE doesn't like tag teams that much, and B, I don't think either guy is good enough as a single star to work, and I think they will see that as problematic and use that as an excuse to not bring them up or not do much with them. I don't know, but yeah, I don't see either one of them being there. But again, I could be completely wrong, so who knows. Honestly, I'm looking forward to seeing him get back into the show. He hasn't appeared since they went on their mid-season break, so I'm looking forward to seeing what they do with him and what direction his character is going to go in next. I don't really have a preference for what I'd like to see. I just want to see more of him and see what they do with him. I'd be open to a redemption storyline if they wanted to do that, although I highly doubt that we could ever get to a point where the main characters in S.H.I.E.L.D. would welcome him back with open arms. I don't picture that happening. But, again, we'll see how it all plays out. He really is one of the more interesting characters in the show. And for those of us that want to see John Cena turn heel, our justification for it comes out of the Grant Ward character, because before they revealed that he was part of the Hydra thing and the show caught up to Captain America the Winter Soldier, he was really the most boring character on the show. And then the second they, quote, turned him heel, he became so interesting, and the entire show just opened the doors for more interesting storyline possibilities and character directions for everybody, and it just made everything more interesting. So yeah, there's your justification for turning Cena heel. It would make everything more interesting, and I think he could get a lot out of it. But in any case, Grant Ward, he's arguably the most interesting character on the show, and I look forward to seeing what they do with him next. I think there's plenty of possibilities for sure. To be honest, at this point, I think it might be too late. I think there was an opportunity to do that. Because even though the talent is limited, I think there was room to promote him and book him in a way that would hide his weaknesses and present him in a way where he'd be a believable killer. And it looked like he was on that path, but then they fed him to John Cena, and we all know how that usually goes. And then he went about a year with no direction and, jobbing out mercilessly, and now then they went through that whole thing where they turned him face again, and right now he's just kind of a guy lost in the shuffle, and he's just kind of there at this point. So I mean, granted, Vince is going to do whatever he wants. I don't think Ryback as a top guy is. I don't think it's possible at this point. I think that ship has sailed, and they kind of screwed the pooch on that. But again, I've been wrong before. To be perfectly honest, everybody loves Raymond. I've seen so much of that stuff happen in my own family between my parents and my grandparents and my aunts and uncles and everything, and the way they talk to each other and all the crazy stuff that they do to each other. I kind of felt like my life was that show for a while. It was really remarkable. It's like, oh my God, that Italian-American, and my mom's whole side of the family is Italian-American, and they are just a barrel of crazy, and a lot of the stuff that you saw on Everybody Loves Raymond, I can vouch for. That stuff actually does happen. It was not made up. this shit actually happens. Especially, and Grandma, I love you. You are a lovely woman, and I love you, and I can't express that enough. But Doris Roberts in that show, that was my grandmother. And it's uncanny how much like my grandmother that character is. It's almost scary. So yeah, I kind of feel like my life already was a sitcom for a while. Which sitcom would I like my life to be like? Mystery Science Theater. I would love to just sit around, watch bad movies all day, and make fun of it. I mean, come on, that's an awesome life. Who wouldn't want to do that? Just hang out with your best friends all day and watch crappy movies and just crack jokes all day. I mean, come on, that'd be the best life ever. I don't really know what to make of it. I keep hearing things about it, and it sounds interesting, and I keep hoping that it becomes another wrestling alternative to do. I mean, obviously, what they did with Wrestle Kingdom 9, I thought was great, and I really enjoyed getting an English-speaking feed of that particular pay-per-view, but I don't know what Jarrett's ultimate plan is, so it's really hard for me to have an opinion of it. I hope, and what I thought they were... My initial impression is that he was going to make deals with New Japan and with AAA and all these other, maybe a few federations in Europe and other ones in Japan and Mexico or whatever, and kind of become like a global version of the NWA where you've got all of these federations working under one brand, and Jarrett would be able to distribute a lot of that footage through the GFW banner here in America. So we would get like New Japan Pro Wrestling, we would get AAA and get all these other things. If that's the goal, great. But I don't know, if there's, I don't know if he has a roster in place. I don't know if there's a plan for a TV show. I don't know what the plan is. And it seems like whatever it is that they're trying to do, it keeps getting put off. So it's something that we'll just have to wait and see, I guess. But I'm open to more wrestling, obviously. And if Global Force Wrestling leads to us getting more New Japan pay-per-views and AAA shows and stuff like that, I'm all for it. Bring it on. Well, if you look at the entire Jurassic Park series, the only one I really liked was the first one, and that one's a classic and it's great, and the other two are kind of weak sauce and really don't live up to that original film at all whatsoever. So I would think that this new one would be better than those two, I would hope. I mean, if you can't be at least... If the fourth one is not at least the second best Jurassic Park movie, then it is going to be a disappointment. And I can't imagine it not being at least that, especially with the whole concept that they actually open the park this time, and that opens the door for more possibilities and everything. And there's been a lot of criticism about the trailer that came out and all that other stuff, but I'm going to wait and see until the movie comes out. And I am interested in seeing it, which is more than I could say about... what I initially thought when I heard they were doing a fourth Jurassic Park movie, because after watching 2 and 3, I was kind of like, I'm done with this. And when I heard they were doing a fourth one, I was like, oh, come on, leave it alone. But some of the ideas here, I think, are pretty interesting, and hopefully they pay off, and hopefully it's a good movie. I actually did an entire video series about that, so I will post the link to those videos down below in the description, and you can go watch those and find out what my 10 picks were. To be perfectly honest, The Legend of Zelda is my favorite video game series of all time. It's the one that I got hooked on very early in life, and I've just followed it ever since. I've not played all of the Zelda games. Obviously, I never played the CDI games. I have no intention of playing those. I haven't played most of the handheld games. Actually, I just got done a couple months ago playing Link Between Worlds, and that was the first handheld Zelda game I'd ever played. So I didn't play Link's Awakening, although I definitely plan on playing that at some point. I can download it on my 3DS, so I'm going to enjoy the hell out of that. Never played Oracle of Seasons or Oracle of Ages, or like Minish Cap or Spirit Tracks or any of those. So I don't have a whole lot of knowledge of the handheld Zelda games, but on the ones on the main consoles, I've played them all and I love them. They're terrific. They're some of my favorite video games of all time. The original is great, and what I love about the original is how little help the game gives you. It's literally just, you go into the cave, get your sword, and it's like, alright, fucker, you figure it out. Which I cannot imagine a video game being like that today, but it's a lot of fun, and it actually does hold up really well, much to my surprise. Zelda 2 I really liked. I know it's kind of the black sheep of the series because it's so different from all the other entries, but I think it is a very good game on its own, and it plays very well. It's hard as hell, but I really enjoyed playing it, and I was like, wow, this one's pretty good, and a lot of people write it off, but I really enjoyed it. If you're willing to accept changes and differences, I think that one's very good. I really like A Link to the Past. That one is probably my number one. There's one other one I would put up there as my number one, and I'll get into that in a little bit. But Link to the Past basically took the original game and just perfected it in ways that I never imagined until I played Link to the Past. That game is just so perfect and so great, and so intricate, and the dungeons are great, and the bosses are great, and the puzzles are great. It's just, the music's great. It plays very well. All the items you get are great. It's just wonderful, and it holds up so well. It's arguably, it's up there. It's probably my favorite video game from the Super Nintendo. It's outstanding. Ocarina of Time, sorry, for N64 is obviously a classic. It was such a big game changer in terms of the series. Basically, it took Link to the Past and just adapted it into this massive 3D environment that, again, I never imagined Zelda could ever be. And that one is so great and wonderful, and introduced things like Z-targeting and the way the combat was done, and all sorts of stuff, and that one is very good and obviously a classic, and that one is also arguably the best Zelda game ever made. And really every Zelda game is derivative of either Link to the Past or Ocarina of Time, or both. And I would argue even Ocarina of Time is derivative of Link to the Past, just given the format of collect the 3 gems, get the Master Sword, and then you go on your second quest and collect the 6 sages. I mean, the actual layout is very similar. It's just, executed very differently in a much different environment. But, yeah, love Ocarina of Time. Majora's Mask is a little weird, but in a good way. It's very different, very unique. The game's also very short, though, and I remember being disappointed by that. I was like, when I beat the 4 dungeons, I was like, wait, I'm done already? I'm already at the final thing? It's like, there's not a second quest? What's going on here? But the whole, like, time-traveling format and the mask trading side game and all that other stuff made for a... it was fun, and I enjoyed it, and I found that a lot of people really like that one. So, to each his own. It's not one of my favorite Zelda games, but I do really like it, and... It's enjoyable. Wind Waker came out with a lot of controversy when it first came out because everybody hated the way the game looked. I didn't have a problem with the way the game looked because to me it looked like kind of a storybook, and I kind of accepted it looking like that, and to me that was true to the roots of Legend of Zelda. Again, that's just my take on it, but... Again, dungeons are great, the setup is great, the setup is unique and gives it its own identity. Everything about it is very good and great, and it's classic Zelda. My only problem with it is that the overworld, traversing that ocean is a pain in the ass, and it is tedious as fuck, and gets really, really tiresome pretty quick. That's real. That, and also, I wasn't a fan of the overworld, or the way to get around the overworld and having to change the wind all the time. That was a little annoying. And buying my overworld map one section at a time was also extremely tedious. And I remember I got so frustrated with it. One day I was playing it. I was like, you know what, fuck this. I'm just going to go to the shop, got to collect my rupees, go to the shop, get the fish bait, and then buy my overworld map one little square at a time. And I remember I spent an entire day doing that because I was just getting sick and tired of like not having my overworld map. It just drove me nuts, and it was a long process, but I got it done. So I didn't like that aspect to it. And the side quest, and I know it's a side quest and completely optional, but the side quest of taking the pictures of all the characters, I expected that to have a bigger payoff, and it really has no payoff. It's just like, oh, you collected them all, so here's your Link statue, and that's all you get. And I'm like, oh, that kind of sucks. You know, the mask trading game gave me the Fierce Deity mask, which, you know, not the greatest thing in the world, but at least it's a fun little thing that you can use in boss battles. You know, Majora's Mask had that little fun thing with it. I mean, the side quest in Wind Waker feels completely pointless. But other than that, you know, those two things aside, Wind Waker is very good, and I've actually played through it twice, and I think it is I think it's a very good entry in the series and very good. Twilight Princess is weird. People loved it when it first came out, and now they seem to have done a double turn where Wind Waker was the one that caught the shit when it first came out, and then they all wanted Twilight Princess because that was the game that they wanted Wind Waker to look like. So they all really liked that one at first. And then in recent years, it feels like it's done a turnaround where everybody loves Wind Waker and now everybody kind of shits on Twilight Princess. I don't understand that. I love Twilight Princess. I thought it was great. And what they were able to do and just make Hyrule look so massive. And it really is probably my favorite Hyrule they ever did because each location is just so rich with detail. And like I said, it's all so massive and so gigantic that the world is so expansive that I just loved walking around it and doing everything. And again, some of the advancements in the combat were really good. One simple thing that Twilight Princess did that I loved, you could run while slashing your sword. That is something I cannot believe was not in Ocarina of Time. It was not in Majora's Mask, and it was not in Wind Waker, and they finally put it in Twilight Princess, and I was like, oh, thank God. And then in Skyward Sword, they took it away. It's like, oh my, what is wrong with you people? But just that little simple thing was so good, and the fighting on the horseback was really well done, and it was a great new mechanic. Wolf Link was, I thought, a very cool little add-on to the game and gave it a nice little gimmick, and it was an advancement on the Dark World, Light World theme from Link to the Past. Like I said, they're all derivative of Ocarina of Time and Link to the Past, but yeah, that one was so great. I thought Twilight Princess was outstanding. It was so rich with detail and so massive. And I should also note, I never played the Wii version. I only played the GameCube version, and I think the GameCube version might be better because it just seemed obvious to me that the game was being adapted for the Wii to coincide with the Wii's launch. But it was really a game made for GameCube, and I found that people kind of feel that way, that it plays better on the GameCube than it does on the Wii. But in any case, I really enjoy Twilight Princess. It's probably my next favorite down from Ocarina and Link to the Past. Because like I said, those are the two best. But I think Twilight Princess is probably the next one down. And then there was Skyward Sword, which I should also note, probably the only major, while I'm talking about the GameCube, probably the only major title on one of the consoles that I didn't play was Four Swords Adventure, which was on GameCube. Again, I don't know. I don't know why. That one just didn't look like I would enjoy it too much, but I haven't heard anything about it either, so I guess it wasn't really one of the major titles, but I never got around to playing that one either. But anyway, the next one after Twilight Princess was Skyward Sword on the Wii, which was overall good. I did enjoy it, but it felt like a couple of steps back from Twilight Princess. Like I said, I couldn't run and slash. I didn't think the world was that extensive either. It wasn't a very big world. I felt like I just kept going to the same 3 locations over and over again. You had the Sky World, and then you had like the 3 main areas that you would go to, and it just didn't feel like Hyrule this time was very big. At least compared to Twilight Princess or even Ocarina of Time, which was, over a decade before that. The motion aspect to it, the Wii motion controller aspect to it, was a little hard at points. Sometimes it worked flawlessly, and other times I found that having to stab forward was very tough, which made one of the final bosses very hard. Not the final boss, but the boss before him, Girahim, like the 3rd time you fight him or whatever. That you have to like kind of stab forward, and that was tricky to pull off for some reason, so that made that very hard. I thought the final boss fight, Demise, was pretty anticlimactic. I thought it was going to be like the greatest boss fight ever for some reason. It just kind of I don't know why. It was very simple once I figured it out. I'm like, oh, this is easy. Especially since, again, comparing it to Twilight Princess, the final fight with Ganondorf in that game is so epic and goes into so many stages. And this is after fighting Zant, and that fight was so extensive and huge that I couldn't believe, like, the final fight in Skyward Sword was kind of anticlimactic by comparison. I was like, oh. The other boss fights I thought were very good and actually had, like, interesting little ways of using the Wiimote controller and everything, and were very big and cinematic. So I really like the boss fights for the most part, but that last one kind of left a sour taste in me. But yeah, overall, I did like Skyward Sword. I did enjoy it. I just felt like a couple of steps back from some of the previous entries. And then the last one I played was Link Between Worlds, which is more in the vein of Link to the Past, and I loved it. It was just great. It was great to play that more classic Zelda style again, and it was really good. And I thought the whole format of being able to merge into the wall and turn into a painting really added a new intrigue to the puzzle-solving aspect to it, because I felt like I had to go over every room twice just to make sure I got everything. So it really, while not like the sexiest, add-on, I mean, it's not like Wolf Link, which, has its own form of combat and everything, or like Epona the Horse, which was a great add-on in Zelda 64. It's not like overly impressive like that, but what it does do, it does enhance the puzzle-solving aspect to it. So I really like that. So that's what made that such a cool ability. My only real knock on it is that the map is identical to Link to the Past. Like, identical. It's the same map. So much so that I already knew where a lot of things were. So at the beginning of the game, when they said, go to the sanctuary, I'm like, I know exactly where that is. And I don't even need the map. I can tell you right where it is. And that kind of... I wish they had just made a new map, because that is one of the things I do like about Legend of Zelda. It's like, ooh, what's Hyrule going to look like this time? And having it look identical to Link to the Past, I was a little disappointing, because I already knew where half the stuff was. But one thing they did do that I really liked in this game, that no other Zelda game has really done, because even though there are side quests and there are puzzles that you have to figure out and everything, every Zelda game is very linear, at least all the ones I've played, where, except for this one, and I'll get into why, you really can't advance to certain dungeons unless you get a certain weapon from the previous dungeon. So there isn't a whole lot of... and obviously there are exceptions. In the original game, you could skip ahead, and I think in Ocarina of Time, you could do one dungeon before the other, depending on how you wanted to do it. But for the most part, it is very linear, and you have to do one dungeon after the other. In this game, it has this really interesting way of acquiring items where you rent them, and then ultimately... if you want to own them permanently, you have to buy them and build up your rupees, which, to be perfectly honest, getting rupees is not really a problem in the game. But by doing that, you can really do the dungeons in any order you want, because they're not reliant on getting the item out of the dungeon, because you have to rent the items. So you still have that strategy, is that you have to know which items you need to go into that particular dungeon, but you can go rent them. You don't have to beat another dungeon to get that item. So I think the way it's laid out, you have to do, I think you have to do the first dungeon, and then you can do 2 and 3 in any order, and then you have to go to Hyrule Castle, and then after that, you can do any order you want. And that type of free range, I thought, was a really cool aspect to Link Between Worlds, and I thought really set it apart from all the other Zelda games. And actually, the way it worked out, I ended up getting almost all the side stuff before... beating... I think I still had 5 dungeons left to do, and I had already done all the side stuff, so I'd like gotten every heart piece and done most of the heart pieces anyway, and gotten most of the items by that point. So it was really fun. It's like, wow, I'm a pretty shitty hero. I've basically abandoned the quest to do all the side stuff, but yeah, I thought that aspect to Link Between Worlds really set it apart from all the other games. So, as you can tell, I'm a huge fan of Legend of Zelda. I could sit here talking about it all day. And sometime soon, I definitely plan on playing Link's Awakening just to see what all the big deal is, because I've heard that one is fantastic. And if it is even half as good as people say it is, I'm sure I'm going to enjoy it. So, yeah, I can't wait to play that. Well, if I had to pick a Mr. SummerSlam, I would go with Bret Hart. I mean, if you look at some of the matches he had in some of those earlier SummerSlams, I mean, he was like a pretty consistent performer during those years while he was there. I mean, the match he had with Mr. Perfect for the IC title in 91, that match is incredible. People love it. His match with the British Bulldog in 92 in the main event, that match is incredible. I already put it over in this video. Actually, going back to 1990, the match he had in the Hart Foundation against Demolition in the 2 out of 3 Falls match for the tag titles was one of the first tag matches I ever saw that really got me to fall in love with tag team wrestling. I mean, that's an outstanding match. The stuff with Jerry Lawler in 93 was intense and just crazy and dramatic and really well booked. The cage match with Owen in 94 is terrific and one of the greatest cage matches ever. And then in 97 he had that main event with Taker, which I thought was great and was very good and very well done all around. So, and Bret Hart had some of the greatest SummerSlam matches of all time. So if I had to pick a Mr. SummerSlam, it would be Bret. Mr. Royal Rumble is a little tougher because I'm not sure how to measure that. Should I measure that by how people perform in the Rumble match itself or how they perform just in general, including other matches? Again, I'd probably go with, for Mr. Royal Rumble, I'd probably go with Shawn because he has so many great performances in the Rumble. Not just because he won 2, but, I mean, you know, the one he did in 95 where he went from wire to wire to win it. His performance in 94 was very good. Some of his performances later on were very good, like the ending with Taker in 2007. I mean, that was terrific. That whole, like, 15-minute sequence there, or whatever it was with Taker, I mean, that's like a... to close out that Royal Rumble match, that was like a match of the year candidate all its own right there. So, yeah, again, Mr. Royal Rumble's a little bit harder to judge, but I'd probably go with Shawn on that one, too. I think Triple H signed those guys and has made NXT into what it is now just to show that he can do it, so that when Vince eventually does step down, he can take over and be the head creative guy. And, you know, I mean, if you want to show that you can write good wrestling, I mean, NXT he's making a pretty good resume for himself. As for NXT touring, I think that's really cool. I think that's a good thing. It's a good wrestling show, and it goes out on the road and reaches newer audiences and everything, and it's under the WWE banner, so you know they're going to have some level of recognition just for that alone. And yeah, any way to get NXT out there, and I tell people all the time, it is the best thing that WWE produces as far as their wrestling content goes, so why not bring your best product to as many as people as possible? So, yeah, I really like a lot of the things that Triple H has done with NXT. I wasn't sure about whether or not the show would work at first. When I first heard that they were going to do kind of a prequel show to Breaking Bad to show how Saul Goodman ultimately became Saul Goodman, I was kind of like, I don't know if that's going to work, but so far, I think the show's been really good. I think it's well written. I think there's a lot of humor in it that really sets it apart from Breaking Bad. And I think it's been pretty good. And the last episode I saw was the Mike-centric episode, which focused on Mike and kind of dove into his backstory a little bit more, and I thought that episode was absolutely terrific. I thought that was a fantastic episode, and was very, very good. So overall, I'm kind of digging the show so far. It's definitely won me over, so I look forward to seeing how it does going forward. Well, that's kind of a tough question to answer because there was literally nothing good about that match. It was kind of like, oh, if you remove all the stuff that people didn't like about the match, would the match work? And I'm like, well, if you removed everything about the match that people didn't like, the match would be completely different. So sure, yeah, I'm sure it would work to some degree. But quite honestly, that match just didn't work. It just didn't work. They didn't know how to use the very smarky crowd that was kind of knew that they did know. They knew that Lesnar was leaving, and they didn't know how to make that work to their advantage. That definitely hurt the match. and neither guy was really pouring their heart and soul into it. You could kind of tell that they were kind of going at half speed and stuff, so obviously that led to a lot of boring chants and a lot of this match sucks chants and all of that stuff. So the thing was just an unmitigated disaster on all fronts, and I don't know if there was any way to really save it unless, like, Lesnar wasn't leaving, and so you get that hatred from the crowd going, or they'd put a little bit more creativity into making the match work a little bit better, or both guys tried a little harder. I don't know. To me, it was one of those matches where I look at it and there was literally nothing I could say about it that was like a positive. It was just probably the most positive thing I have to say about it is like, well, the crowd was at least funny while they were shitting on it. So, yeah, to me, that match was just unsavable. It was just a train wreck on all fronts. It certainly does look that way. I mean, Jesus Christ. I mean, this has been one of the craziest free agency periods in the history of the NFL. It's just been nuts. And it seems like every day there's some ridiculous headline with the Philadelphia Eagles and what they're doing and who they're getting rid of and who they're bringing in. And it's just a three-ring circus right now. So, I mean, it might work out for the Eagles. Who knows? I mean, everything's just so crazy right now. I'm not even sure how to process it. But it could either be a series of great moves and we just don't see what the greatness is, or it could be a complete disaster waiting to happen. Who the hell knows at this point? But it is definitely fun to follow, and it is interesting. It gives us a lot to talk about in football circles and stuff. So I guess I could praise him for that. Personally, I think the best place for an actual physical WWE Hall of Fame would be in WWE territory, somewhere in New York. Not New York City, because I don't think there's any way they could get they could find any space in New York City to put one up. But somewhere in New York State, I would think, basically in that northeastern territory, somewhere in Connecticut, I think would be a good place for it. Again, basically going back to their roots and going to where the WWE really began in that northeastern territory. I think somewhere in that region would be the best place to have an actual WWE Hall of Fame. My understanding of the Rooney Rule and how it's implemented is somewhat limited, so please bear with me. As far as I can tell, as far as I know, the Rooney Rule is a rule from the NFL that head coaching positions, and I think even like upper tier coaching positions like, you know, defensive line coach and defensive coordinator and stuff like that, you're required to interview people of minorities for those positions. You're not required to actually hire people of minorities for those positions, but you have to interview. My question is, what if nobody of minority like applies for the job? So, like, would you hold that against the organization? I don't know. And again, that's my limited understanding of how the rule is implemented, but I think as far as creating opportunities for more people and people of minorities and getting their names out there and getting them involved in the interview process, I think that's completely fine. I don't have a problem with that at all. But at the end of the day, I do feel that the job should go to the one that is best suited for the job, regardless of skin color or regardless of background or anything. It's like, all right, well, background meaning like, you know, personal or biological or anything like that. Like, the only thing that should count in their background is what their football history is, as far as I'm concerned, for coaching jobs and stuff like that. But if they're the best candidate for the job, then they should be hired, and skin color shouldn't get in the way of that. And if the Rooney Rule is a way of making sure that that's the case, then I'm fine with it. I don't believe in hiring somebody to fill a quota. I know that's a lot of detractors of affirmative action kind of use that against it, where it's like you hire somebody who's a minority just to fill your quota and then make it look like you're doing good. Personally, at the end of the day, in a perfect world, which, again, the world is not always perfect, but in a perfect world, people would be hired based on whether or not they are the best candidate to do that job, and that could be based on previous work experience, that could be based on what ideas they can bring to the situation, that could be based on their work ethic, whatever. Those are the things that should matter in hiring for any job. But at the end of the day, I don't think the Rooney Rule creates any problems, as far as I know. Again, but my understanding of how it's implemented is limited, so I'm probably not the best person to consult on the subject. But as far as I can tell, it doesn't create any problems, so I don't really have a problem with it. I'm sure it's been discussed within the WWE about actually creating a physical Hall of Fame, and I don't see any reason why they wouldn't. At some point, I feel like they will. It's just a matter of time, quite honestly. To me, the Friday the 13th franchise was always at its best the goofier it got. Like, the more ridiculous Friday the 13th got, that was when it was at its finest in my eyes. My personal favorite entries are 3 and 6. 3 being the one where Jason finally gets the hockey mask and almost comes close to being fully realized. And I think a lot of the characters in that one are so over the top and so goofy that... and the kills themselves are so goofy that one just really kind of works on so many levels. And the 6th one is the one where Jason finally becomes Zombie Jason, and they got a lot of craziness out of that too, so I really like that one. So those are my 2 favorites, but as far as scares go, I rarely ever found the Friday the 13th films to be that scary. I mean, if you look at entries like Jason Takes Manhattan and Jason Goes to Hell and Jason X, I mean, those movies are so ridiculous and so over the top that it is impossible to be scared by them, at least in my opinion. So I think if you want the scariest one, I would go for the first one. I think the first one has the most, like, mystery and atmosphere surrounding it, and a lot of the kills are really well done, and you don't know who the killer is, so there's a lot of suspense in that aspect. I don't think it's one of the stronger entries for various reasons I don't want to get into without giving away spoilers, but it's not necessarily one of my favorites, but it does have a huge jump scare at the end that really works too. It's probably the best scare in the entire series, so truthfully, I don't think the films overall are that scary, except for maybe that first one. I think the first one is probably, again, if you're looking for scares, I think the first one is the way to go.